prove a dramatic comeback king to help the beleaguered Tories? Well, they need some kind of miracle at the moment. 12,000 this year alone have crossed on small boats to the UK from the continent. Nearly 41,000 in total since promising to stop the boats. Jeremy Corbyn came back to haunt Sir Keir Starmer this morning when Sir Keir admitted that he would have served as a minister under Jeremy Corbyn. And Ed Davey, how did he go from the pratfall paddleboarder to a credible leader of the opposition? Loads and loads of politics to sink our teeth into, as well as other stuff, of course. Get in touch the usual ways, gbnews.com/you'll say. But before all of that, it's your headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Good afternoon. The top stories from the GB newsroom. More than 41,000 migrants have now crossed the English Channel in small boats since Rishi Sunak promised to end the crisis in January last year. GB News can reveal that the figure was passed today after more than 600 migrants made the crossing earlier this morning amid improved weather conditions. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer highlighted his party's plan to take swift action.
I think the idea of processing claims as close to source as possible is a good idea. We also need to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade, because under this Tory government they've lost control of the borders, and we will set up a border security command, a new elite command with new powers and resources to smash the gangs that are running the vile trade in the first place, because, as you rightly say, a record number have crossed the Channel this year already, and nobody should be making that journey across the Channel.
But the Prime Minister insists his government's plan is working and a deterrent is needed to curb the number of crossings.
It's desperately sad to see young children being put in these very dangerous situations making these crossings. It just illustrates why we have to stop the boat, something I'm determined to do and have a clear plan to do so. If re-elected as Prime Minister, the flights will go to Rwanda. We will build that deterrent, removing the incentive for people to come here in the first place. That is the only way to solve this problem. And in contrast, Keir Starmer would release everyone that we've detained. Illegal migrants would be on our streets. They wouldn't be on the planes, which would be cancelled. There would be no deterrent. There'd be an amnesty for illegal migrants, would be the soft touch in Europe.
In other news, a review has found that 4 detectives who ran the first investigation into the murder of Stephen Lawrence should not face criminal charges. It found there was insufficient evidence and no real prospect of conviction. It means none of the 4 retired detectives will be charged. Stephen Lawrence was murdered in 1993 in a racist attack in South London. The initial investigation was harshly criticised and failed to bring anyone to justice. The Labour Party says it'll bring face-to-face banking back to the high streets with 350 new hubs in towns and villages. It would see staff from several banks sharing the same space, helping fill gaps left by branch closures. Consumer group Which says more than 6,000 branches have closed since 2015. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats are promising to spend £10 million a year to tackle sewage dumping by water companies. New quality inspectors would work as part of a newly created Clean Water Authority. Sir Ed Davey says it's crucial that Britain's water is cleaned up.
There's nowhere near enough sewage monitors. We call them sewage busters. We want to provide £10 million in our cost of manifesto, so our new regulator, the Clean Water Authority, has the resources, because we do need a tough regulator, as we're proposing, with powers coming from other regulators, so we have a much stronger regulator, but they need the resources to do the job. And we've seen on the Conservatives cutting back the Environment Agency, where some of these monitors were, and we want to make sure the resources are there as well as the rules.
The leader of Reform UK says the party has been let down by a company that was contracted to vet its candidates. Nigel Farage says a large sum of money was paid to the firm, which he didn't name, and flagged possible legal action. It comes after Reform was hit by a series of revelations about some of its candidates, with one person resigning after having previously supported the British National Party. The Russian president will arrive in North Korea shortly for his first state visit in 24 years. Vladimir Putin's expected to receive a warm welcome in the isolated country. He'll hold a meeting with Kim Jong-un, who he's praised for firmly supporting the invasion of Ukraine, before continuing to Vietnam later in the week. And finally, the French actress Anouk Aimée has died at the age of 92. She became famous for her sophisticated performances in a string of classics throughout the 1950s and the 60s, including La Dolce Vita, 8½, and A Man and a Woman, which earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. She made her last screen appearance in 2019 and credited her long career to always listening to her colleagues and not taking herself too seriously. Reminds me of someone. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Martin.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now let's head straight over to Devon, where Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is talking to farmers.
The Labour manifesto, there were just 87 words about farming. No commitment to food production and food security. No commitment at all about the farming budget in the next Parliament. Forget about increasing it like we're going to do. They won't even say that they're going to protect it. Right? Like, that is the choice for you at this election, which is why it's so important that you come out and vote and you talk to your colleagues. Now, beyond farming, I also want to make sure that you have financial security. As David said, we've been through a tough few years as a country, COVID, Ukraine, and my primary job when I took on this role was to make sure I could deliver financial security to you and your families. And we have made progress, but there's more to go. And that comes clearly when you can see our approach to tax cuts. Now, I believe in a country, like all of you, where you should work hard, but when you work hard, you should be rewarded. That's why we're going to cut tax on national insurance. We're going to halve it in the next Parliament. For those of you who are thinking about setting up your own business, becoming self-employed, I know what a risk that is. But I want to create a country where that type of risk-taking, that culture of enterprise, innovation is something that we support. So we're going to abolish national insurance for those who are self-employed in the next Parliament. For young couples who want to get on the housing ladder, I want to support them. I remember what it felt like to get the keys to my first flat. I believe in a country where everyone can own their own home, which is why we're going to abolish stamp duty for first-time buyers in the next Parliament. For those of you with young children, with families, I want you to be supported, so we're going to change how child benefit works to expand it to many more families, because family is perhaps, I think, the most important thing in all of our lives and deserves to be supported. And I also believe in a country where if you work hard all your life, if you put in, then when you retire, you should have the dignity and security that you deserve. That's why David introduced the triple lock and protected it, and it's why in this election we've put the triple lock plus on the table. So if we're re-elected, we're going to raise the threshold, delivering a tax cut for pensioners and making sure that the state pension never, ever pays tax. Now, in contrast, Labour haven't matched a single one of those things. So, for example, for the first time in our country's history, we'll have a retirement tax where pensioners are paying tax on the state pension. And worse than that, you add up all the things that they said they want to do, it comes to a £2,000 tax bill for every working family in our country. And I don't think that's right, and that's why I'm fighting so hard in this election to deliver the security for you and your families. And it's worse than that, because I fundamentally don't think that the Labour Party's values are the values of our country when it comes to things like net zero. We should get there, but we should get there in a sensible way, not saddling you all with enormous bills or damaging our energy security. We believe in compassion and fairness when it comes to migration, but we've got to be in control of our own borders, because that's just common sense, it's just fair, and we've got a plan to deliver that. And when it comes to welfare, what we've seen since the pandemic is far too many people who can work are being left on welfare and not supported into work, and I think we can change that for the better. Reform the welfare system, support people into work and free up money that we can reinvest in tax cuts and public services. That's the right approach to our country. But above all, as David says, this election is about the future. It's about who's got the bold ideas. It's about who's got a clear plan to deliver a secure future for all of you. Now, it's not just in farming, it's across the board that the Conservative Party can do that to you. We are the ones that can deliver financial security. We are the ones that share your values when it comes to freedom, to opportunity, to aspiration, to security. And given everything that you've done for our country, for your community, I promise you, I will stand up for you, I will deliver for you, and I will fight incredibly hard to deliver that better future for you and your families. Thank you. Right. Now, I think we've got... Are we going to do some questions? Jerry, who's in charge of the questions here? All right, sir, go for it.
Okay, Brian Griffiths, I'm a sheep farmer. I'm no public speaker, so apologies for my bungling. So I'd like to just touch on essentially three buzzwords: production, sustainability, and environment. As farmers, we love to produce, you said that. We love to do it sustainably, that makes sense for us. And we love the environment as much as anybody else. We love to see the hedges and wildlife and so on. You want those three things. The public at large want those three things, and we are ready and willing to do it. So where's the problem? It should be simple. But the reality is that somewhere along the way, there is... I'll have to check. Can you hear me, guys?
I can definitely hear you, but
The lobbyists come into play. And by lobbyists, I mean people such as World Wildlife Fund or Rewilders, or even the likes of Natural England. And they have their own tunnel vision, and they have their own agenda. And what we tend to see is policy and schemes that are heavily influenced by them. They turn out they're complex, they're confused, but worst of all, they often have significant unintended consequences. So we find that these schemes can have an effect of driving farmers off good land, driving production abroad, and so on, all of which can be very negative, and it can disrupt the natural balance of things, if you like. So, and then we end up, it brings conflict, and so we see the likes of Selene. I've been with Selene when farmers are attacking Selene over a policy that DEF has brought in, and yet the reality is we're all trying to do the same thing. So to turn my ramblings into a question, can you give us an assurance that when you are forming policy, that you will consult with us? We have the environment, and we are the producers, and involve us in forming that policy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Look, excellent question, and the simple answer is, of course, yes. And I think you're right, because a lot of farming policy got hijacked, it got influenced by people who weren't focused on the things that I was talking about. Right? And first and foremost, we can't lose sight of the fact that food production is the most important thing. And that's what we are doing now, and I can assure you we will continue to do that. And actually, if you want to have a look at the alternative, you can just see what the Labour Party are doing in Wales. Right? If you talk to any of your colleagues out there, as I'm sure you have, and I've been out there, they are terrified. Right? They are absolutely terrified. When I meet farmers there, they are fearful for their livelihoods, because Labour are doing exactly what you were worried about, which is top-down imposing targets on farmers and driving them off their land, right? Influenced by all the people that you said. They don't care about food security and food production. They don't care about the impact on jobs or people's livelihoods or incomes. They're in pursuit of ideological targets, in hoc to many of these interest groups, and that's leaving farmers in Wales absolutely devastated and anxious about their future, right? That's what, if you replicated, by the way, what they were going to do in Wales here in England, it means something like 2 million acres of land would be taken out of food production. Just think about that. It would mean something like 40,000 jobs would be lost and 28,000 farms would be at risk of closing. Right? That is what the Labour Party is doing in Wales, and that's what I'm fighting very hard to stop. Because everything you said is right, Brian. I agree with it. Of course we should work with you to make sure the schemes are simple, they're easy to use, and they support you to do what you want, which is produce food, of course look after the environment at the same time, but fundamentally get on, produce the food that our country needs, and leave you to get on with it. All right, next, who have we got? Yes, sir.
Prime Minister, welcome to North Devon, a county very similar to your own, agriculture and tourism. That's quality straw you stood on there. In fact, I need that for my daughter's wedding in 6 weeks' time. Farmers have access to unlimited solar and wind and would like the opportunity to harness the energy. But there's no grid connection and the planning process is difficult, to say the least. How do you move this forward? And on a personal note, we have put in planning for a pond to enhance the wildlife habitat. 6 months on, and the council are still asking for wildlife reports and biodiversity net gain. I'm not asking for 10 houses.
Yeah. All right. No, good question. I hear that a lot as well from my farmers. So I think the thing that we can do to make life easier for all of you is something called a permitted development right, which is where you just get to do things quite quickly without having to jump through a bunch of hoops. And actually, we've just passed a few of them. One of them is for those like David's neighbours who want to convert old agricultural buildings into more commercial ones like farm shops. Right, so that is now very easy for you to do if you want to diversify and bring extra income into your farm. But the other one that we passed most recently was barn top and rooftop solar, making it far easier for those of you that want to put that in. It is now straightforward, quick process, and we're going to look to expand these permitted development rights. So where we can find specific things that we think are good for you, good for the community, good for the economy, where we make them fast track and easy to get through, so you're not having to jump through tons of hoops or fill out lots of paperwork. So as I said, we've done a couple already that hopefully gives you a sense that I mean what I say on this, and if there are more opportunities in the future to go further, we should absolutely do that. I can't help you with the pond, though. I'm sorry about that. So, and congratulations on your daughter's wedding as well. Great news.
Prime Minister, very good to see you in North Devon. I'm afraid I'm not from North Devon. I grew up on South Dartmoor, so I'm a moor person, and I thought I'd bring you a national park question. Brace yourself. OK, so first of all, I would like to thank the Prime Minister for guaranteeing in his manifesto a guaranteed budget for agriculture for the next Parliament. That is something that is significantly lacking in other manifestos. And we know how many people will go knocking on the door at Number 10 and at DEFRA to try and get more money away from our budget. So thank you very much for that. And for listening to the lobbying on a lot of behalf. On to the national park. You've announced a new national park. There has to be a reason why every single person who thinks a national park is going to be in their back garden absolutely dreads it happening. And I've got one suggestion, because I like to keep things simple. My suggestion is that you have a third statutory responsibility, and that is that when you create a national park, our social and cultural well-being and economic well-being must be considered. Listen to this one.
That is a very good suggestion. So I have not one but two national parks in my part of the world, because we have the Dales and the Moors in North Yorkshire, and I've heard your suggestion and have thought actually about it in the past. I think there's a good argument for it. So I think those of you that well, so those of you who don't know, so our national parks have these statutory objectives. So when it comes to things like planning or supporting projects, if it's not, squarely economic development, they might say, oh, we can't do it. And there's an argument for saying, hang on, you've got to think more broadly than the narrow definition that you're given. So that's a very fair thing that we should definitely take away and have a look at, because I think I broadly agree with you, right? People think about our national parks or our countryside in the wrong way. Some of them think that they're museums. They're not. Right? They're living, breathing places that only look like that. The Yorkshire Dales up near me, it looks like that, and people come to visit it because all your colleagues up there tend the landscape in a particular way. Right? It is managed, and when those dry stone walls fall down, right, out of their own pockets, they say, well, let's put a dry stone wall back up, even though it's going to cost me 5-6 times more than putting up a regular fence, because, as I was saying, you care about your role as stewards of our landscape. And we need to get that right in these national parks. For example, where I am, I don't know about yours, 97% of the Yorkshire Dales National Park is private land owned by farmers. It's not some government land that's owned by the, by the government. It is owned individually by farmers, and making sure that we support them to achieve all our objectives is really important, and something I have, as I said, some sense of from home. But thank you for your question. All right, who else? Who's next? Who have we got? Yes, sir. And then we'll come over to you.
Okay. Prime Minister Lord Cameron, I just question, Toby Ansdell, I farm nearby, just a couple of miles away, livestock farmer, okay, heavily involved in the local area in the, thank you, in the TB coal, okay?
Yeah.
We were part of the group that put the coal together in this area. The coal nationally has been a huge success, a 56% reduction in TB. We're also seeing, on top of that, hedgehogs, skylarks, all those, the side effects of it. We know that culling badgers is not the only issue to do with TB. There are other things that need to be done alongside, but at the moment it's the most effective because of the lack of vaccine coming forward. Most livestock farmers would quite happily accept a vaccine if it appeared, but it's not appearing any day soon. We need a commitment from an incoming government that the coal will continue in the form that it has been, because it's been a success. Prime Minister, can we have that commitment?
Yes, of course you can, because, look, I see firsthand the absolute devastation that TB causes to those of you that are impacted by it. Right? I grew up in a small family business. My mum was a pharmacist, had a shop, and it was our life. right? And it's when something happens to that business, you know, it affects all of you, not just financially, but emotionally, psychologically. And I see that firsthand talking to those of your colleagues that have been impacted by TB and what it means for them. So it's right that we do everything we can. And I'm pleased that we're making progress, as I think you acknowledged. The outbreaks this past year are the lowest they've been in 20 years. Right? And part of that is because, as you said, the success of the badger culls where we've done them have brought the incidence rates down by just over 50%. So that shows that that plan is working, and I can give you that commitment. Right? I believe in the science, and yes, of course, a vaccine is good, and we're investing in research and development, but that is going to take some time. So culls have to be part of the solution, and particularly when it comes, as you said, to badgers. When you look around the world, there's no country that I think I know of where they've eliminated TB in cattle without eliminating it in whether it's possums or badgers or the equivalent wildlife, right? Which is why I think culls are important, and you'll see that in our manifesto. I can give you that reassurance and commitment today. And again, we are the only party at this election who can give you that commitment to demonstrate to you that I understand what you're going through. I know what it takes to back you. That's what you will always get from us. Right. I think we got time for one more. Yeah, perfect, sir.
I don't think I need this. Sorry.
That's great.
You've travelled quite a way today to come here. Well, you didn't come quite as far as I travelled as far as I did. I came from Sydney, Australia. But let me say this, as a broad general statement. From what I've listened to in the last couple of weeks that I've been in this country, and I've seen and heard what the opposition is saying, that they're targeting things that they believe you haven't. And then they say they're going to grow the economy. Well, that's important to all of you, whether you're in farming country or whether you're in manufacturing or whatever. And the only way, you, as the Prime Minister would know, the only way you grow the economy is to create the environment in which the private sector can thrive and grow. Governments don't generate, they encourage, they provide the platform from which that part of the sector of our community can thrive. And I'm sorry, but if Labour get in, they're going to do the exact opposite. They're going to impede the very people who want to grow and continue with what you've developed in this country. And so, Prime Minister, please, on behalf of all the local farmers, business people and everyone else, keep it doing what you're doing, because it's absolutely critical to the welfare of this nation.
Well, thank you very much for that. That's probably a good note for me to end on by saying this, and that is the type of country that I want to build. I talked about my small business background, but ultimately all of you are how we grow the economy. Right? It's people like you who are working incredibly hard, trying to build something for your families that you want to pass on to them, which, by the way, Labour today just again confirmed they will not support agricultural property relief, right, which is a £600,000 tax bill for an average farm wanting to pass that on to the next generation. Right? I don't believe in that. I believe in a country where we support aspiration, where we support people who are working hard, ambitious for their futures, taking risks like all of you do. I know it's not easy, right? And you should be applauded for that. You should be supported for that. And that's why we're cutting your taxes across the board to create that environment for all of you, to reward your risk-taking, your innovation, because that's how we'll build an incredible country. Right? And if we can build an incredible country where people like all of you are thriving, where your hard work is rewarded, we can achieve great things. I know the last couple of years have been tough. They've been tough for all of you. They've been tough for everyone. But we have now turned a corner thanks to everyone's resilience and sacrifice. Inflation down, the economy growing, wages rising, right? The future is there for us. If we get this right at this election, if you put me back in Downing Street, I can deliver for all of you. Right, we're going to do the big, bold things that are necessary. We've got a plan that is working, and more importantly than all of that, right, my values are your values, and we will build a country founded on those values of opportunity, of aspiration, of security. Right? That is what all of us believe, and that is what I can deliver for all of you. So thank you very much for having me here today. It's been a great pleasure.
And that was Rishi Sunak. On his shoulder there, Lord David Cameron giving what he would hope was a barnstorming speech to farmers in North Devon. Got to be said, very warmly received by the rural community there. Now let's move on to a story we might just have preempted on this show yesterday. And with Rishi Sunak miles behind in the polls, Boris Johnson He's backing the Tories in a series of videos on social media. It's also been reported that thousands of letters signed by Mr Johnson will be sent to voters this week. Well, our political editor Chris Hope is spending the day with the Conservatives on the campaign trail. Chris, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. Here we go. It's only a matter of time. Now they're saying it's time to bring back Boris.
Hi Martin, yeah, welcome. I'm in North Devon. I'm in the barn where you've just seen the Prime Minister speak to farmers standing on the bale of straw, as you saw there. That's right. Clearly something has happened. They've noted the support that Boris Johnson is giving out to individually to MPs, to candidates to be MPs, I should say, on the Tory side. And we've heard from Rishi Sunak today over lunchtime how important he finds it. He clearly thinks, he tells us, it's a party-coordinated idea. But here's what he had to say to reporters earlier on the coast here in North Devon.
Well, it's great that Boris is supporting the Conservative Party. I very much welcome that. He's endorsing many candidates in videos and letters which have been coordinated by the campaign. I know that will make a difference. And of course, every week he's making the case in his column and making sure that everyone understands that what a Labour government would do to this country and why it's important that everyone votes Conservative. And I'm glad he's doing that.
So Boris Johnson is making very clear he is trying to do his best to help. He's writing columns for the Daily Mail, he's doing messages and letters on Twitter and the like, but he hasn't yet appeared anywhere. And will he actually do an interview? Will he appear on GBNews or anywhere else? Let's wait and see. It's clearly important to the Tory party that in 2019 there was a personal mandate for Boris Johnson, and trying to get those votes out might mitigate what could be a disaster at the polls for Rishi Sunak.
Well, don't rule out, Chris Hope, Boris Johnson blasting through that barn wall in some kind of agricultural machinery, making a dramatic entrance. Superb. Thanks for that update, Chris Hope. Always a pleasure. Now, moving on to a GBNews exclusive, and we can reveal that more than 12,000 small boat migrants have now crossed the English Channel this year alone. And more than 600 more migrants came over illegally just this morning. And GBNews viewers can see some of them arriving in Dover on your screens now. Now, the total number of crossings since the Prime Minister made that pledge to stop the boats has now reached an eye-watering 41,500. And I'm joined now by Kevin Saunders, who's a former Chief Immigration Officer with UK Border Force. Kevin, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. This will no doubt come as absolutely no surprise to you. You've been saying for many, many months there's no way that Rishi Sunak, nor indeed anybody, can stop the boats with the current policies we have in place. Kevin Saunders.
Good afternoon, Martin. Yeah, you're right. These figures are no surprise at all. In fact, the only surprise, really, is they're so low. I thought that they would be much, much higher. Perhaps when we have the fine weather that we're being promised next week, they will be. Because now that Rwanda is completely off the table, unless the Tories win the election, then there's nothing to stop the migrants coming to the UK. There is no deterrent at all. So they will come over en masse.
And Kevin Saunders, I read a report this morning of one human trafficker alone operating from Dunkirk to Calais, making £800,000 per year out of human trafficking. And so long as there's no feasible way of them being returned to any country, Sir Keir Starmer has said that he will scrap Rwanda on day one. Kevin Saunders, this will only continue.
It will, yes, it will continue. It really will continue. And I think it's very, very important that you people in the media actually tell the people, the electorate, that at the moment we cannot remove people to their countries of origin, because to remove somebody, you have to have a document. Now, Sir Keir was saying that he was going to speed up all the applications and remove people that had no right to be in the UK. Well, I'm very sorry he can't, because these people have thrown their documents away. We don't know who they are. They cannot be returned. And this is really, really important. And it's something that you guys in the media haven't picked up yet, and you need to, because you can't remove these people.
Well, I think, to be fair, we have been highlighting that, Kevin Saunders, because, of course, so you can throw your documents in the channel. You can claim to be from anywhere. Certainly, you can claim to be from a country where if you return to that, then your life would be in imminent danger. Therefore, totally short-circuiting the entire process of deportation.
Exactly. You're dead right, Martin. You're dead right. And this is something this is why we need to have a huge deterrent like Rwanda, so that we don't have to worry about returning people to their countries of origin, because we can't. And what will happen is the numbers will just get more and more and more. 12,000 so far, 30, 40,000 by the end of the year, if we're lucky.
Well, Kevin Saunders, it's Groundhog Day in Dover, and no doubt we'll speak again soon. Thanks for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, and we'll hear from Sir Keir Starmer amid claims that a Labour government would look to forge closer ties with the European Union. But first, it's your headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories. The Prime Minister faced questions from farmers on a visit to Devon this afternoon. Rishi Sunak said it was a privilege to understand their contribution to society before warning that 40,000 jobs could be lost as a result of Labour's plans.
Now, the contrast at this election is crystal clear. Because whilst we're going to do all those things for you, as David said, in the Labour manifesto, there were just 87 words about farming. No commitment to food production and food security. No commitment at all about the farming budget in the next Parliament. Forget about increasing it like we're going to do. They won't even say that they're going to protect it. Right? Like, that is the choice for you at this election, which is why it's so important that you come out and vote and you talk to your colleagues.
More than 41,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel since Rishi Sunak promised to stop the boats. The Prime Minister says it's further evidence for the Rwanda policy that it's necessary, while Sir Keir Starmer pointed to Labour's plan to set up the new Border Security Command. A review has found that 4 detectives who ran the first investigation into the murder of Stephen Lawrence should not face criminal charges. It found there was insufficient evidence and no real prospect of conviction. Stephen Lawrence was murdered in 1993 in a racist attack in South London. The initial investigation was harshly criticised and failed to bring anyone to justice. Labour says it'll bring face-to-face banking back to the high streets with 350 new banking hubs in towns and villages. It would see staff from several banks sharing the same space, helping fill gaps left by branch closures. And the Russian president is due to arrive in North Korea shortly for his first state visit in 24 years. Vladimir Putin's expected to receive a warm welcome in the isolated country. He'll hold a meeting with Kim Jong-un, who he's praised for firmly supporting the invasion of Ukraine, before continuing to Vietnam later in the week. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2715 and €1.183. The price of gold is £1,828.23 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,190 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, if you want to get in touch, simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay, and I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Northbound M42 is struggling in the roadworks. There's been a bump just after Junction 5. That's the Solihull bypass turn-off, so long delays back towards Shirley and Dorridge. A Junction 4 lane closure in place. The Bluestone Heath Road in Scandalby in Lincolnshire. The A1028 closed off is to assist there the scene of a collision. There's been a multi-vehicle accident on the northbound side of the M5. Junction 30 up to 29 around Exeter, so seeing queues on the approaches. Kent, coastbound, eastbound, M20, junction 3 for the M26 to Leybourne at 4, 2-lane shutter, broken down lorry being recovered, and Whitechapel in London, the northbound side of the Cambridge Heath Road, the A107 closed between Mile End Road and Darling Row and queuing for a serious collision. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Today we've got two fantastic individuals who have invented a teddy bear to help children who are suffering with mental health.
Yes, so Lynn and Samantha Crilly came up with the idea for the Trouble Muncher toy following Samantha's own battle with an eating disorder and OCD.
Yes, the teddy comes with a notepad and encourages its owners to write down what's troubling them, and then they can pop the note into the rucksack on the bear's back.
I struggled with mental health most of my life, actually, and oh no, it's fine. I've got one. I feel quite sorry for you. But and one thing I always did was message my mum, and it was a thought disassociation kind of technique. I would message you. Even now, I message you thoughts that come into my mind, but massively when I was younger. And I thought, what happens if you're younger and you don't have this?
Yeah, and I think in today's technology-fueled world, I think we go back to basics, and it just helps them to process by writing it down. Everything's so instant these days.
So it's like an indirect way of telling your parents how you're feeling, what you're going through. Such a great idea. What's the feedback been from parents who have got a Trouble Muncher for their kids? What have you got any stories?
It's been really good. In one household, he sits on the kitchen side, and I think during the day, the parents, the children put their worries in, or at night, and then they know that their parents will look at it during the day. And it's gone into some schools as well.
You'd imagine you'd want one of these Trouble Munchers in every classroom and in every school up and down the country, because children who are being bullied, for example, who feel like they can't tell their parents, they're too embarrassed to talk about it. This is such an important tool, isn't it, for children to communicate that?
Yeah, well, you were saying Mum's a mental health counsellor, and you had a young child who had Snapchat AI. So you talk to an AI in Snapchat, and that's what they talk to now.
The People's Channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:39. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, later in the show, I'll look at the crisis facing Emmanuel Macron, who, like Rishi Sunak, seems to have called a snap election that it looks like he may just well lose. Now, Sir Ed Davey says the Tories haven't just failed in government, they've also failed in opposition. It comes at a time when there's more and more talk the Liberal Democrats could win the second most seats in next month's election. And Sir Ed's also outlined plans to recruit 100 new water quality inspectors as part of a plan to clamp down on firms that dump sewage.
There's nowhere near enough sewage monitors. We call them sewage busters. We want to provide £10 million in our cost of manifesto, so our new regulator, the Clean Water Authority, has the resources, because we do need a tough regulator, as we're proposing, with powers coming from other regulators, so we have a much stronger regulator, but they need the resources to do the job. And we've seen on the Conservatives cutting back the Environment Agency, where some of these monitors were, and we want to make sure the resources are there as well as the rules.
It seems that Rishi Sunak and Grant Shapps think that the Tories won't win this election, and that they're just trying to kind of limit a Labour supermajority. Are you worried about a Labour supermajority?
My job is to make sure we beat as many Conservative MPs as possible, and SNP MPs in Scotland. Liberal Democrats, I think, are getting our messages over in this campaign on health and care, on sewage, we've just been talking about, and on the economy. And the more Liberal Democrat MPs we have, the better. The truth is the Conservative Party have failed in government. They'd fail in opposition. They're a divider party. And I think the Liberal Democrats could be very important in the next Parliament.
That's Lib Dem leader Ed Davey now. We are the People's Channel, and so we want to know what the great British public is thinking ahead of this general election. Here's the latest in our People's Voice series.
Hi, I'm Cyan Astley and I live in South Manchester. So the most important issue for me in the upcoming general election is that the next government sort out and get stability in housing, property and the economy. I work as a landlord and I have done for 25 years and it's just a mess at the minute. So as a voter in South Manchester, I have floated between the Lib Dems and Labour. Those are your choices in South Manchester. The Conservatives never get in this area, don't stand a chance. On a national level, the Conservatives, for me as a landlord and a property owner, have been unbelievably disappointing. I think they've been disappointing for landlords and tenants, to be honest. They have not got their act together. What they've promised hasn't materialised. They've chopped and changed their mind. They haven't followed through on their promises. They've made it confusing for everybody. So they've been useless, actually, on every front. The problem is, as landlords who had traditionally been supported by the Conservative Party, when Labour get in, you think, oh God, because they talk about rent controls, they talk about the fact that they don't like landlords. Landlords have got a really bad rap, so it makes me really nervous. So it's quite confusing, and I just... Who do you vote for? As somebody that owns property, I really don't know who to vote for because I don't know who will be the worst. And that's not to say I don't know who will be the best, because I don't think either of them will be good.
You know, I say it every time, I absolutely love those things. You know, listen to voters, share their concerns, tell them what they're thinking. I think it's brilliant. People's Channel doing a great job there. Well done, Sean. Now, time for our giveaway now, and your chance to win over £16,000 worth of prizes. That's 15 grand, tax-free cash, and a whole host of summer treats on top. Now, it could all be yours, but you've got to be in it to win it. And here's the details that you need.
Don't miss out on your chance to win our Summer Spectacular. And have we got a prize for you? First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your Summer Spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction. So you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Well, it's the 40th anniversary of the Battle of Orgreave, when 10,000 striking miners clashed with 5,000 police officers. The effects of those events are still being felt to this very day. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Thunderstorms may start to break out over the next few hours with a warning in force for some of us, but for most areas it will stay dry through this evening and into tomorrow as well. That's because high pressure is not too far away. It's building in from the south and west for the next few days, bringing many of us plenty of fine weather. But there is a risk of thunderstorms through this evening for parts of northern England. So do take care if you're in those areas and take a closer look at the details of the warning. But for most of us, it should stay fairly dry this evening and overnight. There will be some cloud around, particularly across central areas of England and up towards Scotland as well. And it will turn quite cold under the clear skies, particularly across Northern Ireland and Scotland. We could see temperatures down to the low single figures overnight tonight, but there will be plenty of sunshine to start the day across northern Scotland, where it's been fairly cloudy and quite cold through the past few days with that northerly wind. It's going to be a much brighter start on Wednesday, and in Northern Ireland as well, wall-to-wall sunshine to start the day. Temperatures around 11 or 10 degrees first thing, but they will rise through the afternoon. In the south as well, plenty of sunshine to start the day. So for many of us, a very fine start to the day indeed, and there'll be plenty more fine weather to come through tomorrow. It will remain largely dry for the bulk of the UK. There's a risk of the odd shower developing here and there, but I think you'll be very unlucky to be caught in any of those showers. However, notice we do have cloud thickening from the northwest. This is the weather front approaching into parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. It will bring cloudier skies and slightly cooler weather here to end the day, but inland areas of England and Wales could see temperatures climbing towards the mid-20s. Now, through the rest of Wednesday evening, plenty of fine weather to end the day. That weather front won't make too much progress inland, although skies will remain cloudy across the far northwest of Scotland. And that pattern continues as we head to Friday and the weekend, with plenty of dry and warm weather across the south.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And don't miss a special edition of State of the Nation with Michael Portillo tonight and tomorrow night at 8 p.m, right here on GB News. Now, today is the 40th anniversary of one of the most violent clashes in British industrial history. The Battle of Orgreave took place on June the 18th, 1984, and saw striking coal miners and thousands of police officers clash at a coking plant near Rotherham. Our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley has this report.
Orgreave is now home to thousands, but 40 years ago, the scene here was very different.
Where all these houses are, that was all fields where most of the Battle of Orgreave took place in that area. This part, where the reservoirs are, where the lakes are, was the tip for all the waste. And it was an ideal place to stage the Battle of Orgreave, actually, because it was staged.
The former coking plant was host to one of the most brutal clashes in the miners' strike. Tensions came to a head after Arthur Scargill called for a mass picket here. The National Union of Mine Workers believed if the miners could prevent lorries carrying coke from the plant, the government would be forced to negotiate. Police were prepared. Thousands of officers from different forces carried riot shields and batons, and some on horseback bore down on picketers. Retired South Yorkshire miner David Turton is still haunted by that day.
They all came over the bridge, which is down there, just like lambs to the slaughter, for the want of a phrase. And there were 6,000 police and 40-odd mounted police and police dogs. So they weren't playing, they meant business. What happened was meant and planned, and it was so sad. And when Maggie said they are trying to replace the rule of law with the rule of the mob, nothing could have been further from the truth. Them 95 who went to court for riot, I don't think any of them 95 had been in a police station before in their lives.
At Renishaw Miners Club in South Yorkshire, the memories of that violent day live on.
I was there at Orgreave, saw innocent people getting trampled on with horses, older than me, who couldn't run, get out of way of things, people getting battered. I still get flashbacks of that now, to this day.
My husband was there that day. There's no weapons on them whatsoever, there's nothing. They just went down there to protest about the jobs. And it was meant to be violent that day. It was Thatcher's way, proving who she were.
You'd have thought people would forget about it after 40 years, but not in these kind of villages, you don't forget.
So for this community, it's important to remember this anniversary.
It's 40 years, and I think back how many of the men aren't here anymore. This was a strike to end all strikes. There will never, ever be another one like it.
In a statement, South Yorkshire Police said it would not be appropriate for the force of today to seek to explain or defend the actions of the force in 1984. We have been very clear about our intent to make as much of the relevant documentation as is possible available to the public. But this is at least 18 months away, and campaigners are still calling for an inquiry into the events at Orgreave. Anna Riley, GB News.
It's very moving watching that. 40 years on, the coal miners' strike still casts a long shadow over Britain. I should know my dad was down the pit 47 years, of which I'm very, very proud. Still gets talked about now. I went to an outside broadcast at the Bentinck Miners' Welfare in Ashfield in Nottinghamshire. Nigel Farage was there. My dad was there. There were coal miners there all these years on from different sides of that strike. You could see they still had that glint in their eye. They still aren't ready to forgive. Long shadows cast. Very moving report. Now, moving on. Sacre Bleu, in a cross-channel version of taking coals to Newcastle, the French want to start selling tea to us Brits. Now, I like their champagne and their vino, but their tea, that's taking the pee. Let's cross now to Paris and speak to journalist David Chazan. David, you couldn't make this up. The French moan all the time about British cheese, British wine, live roast boeuf, anything. Now they're trying to flog us tea.
Well, that's right. And many a British visitor to France has bemoaned the difficulty of getting a decent cuppa here, justifiably, might I add. But now the French have decided that they're not only going to package, brand and sell tea to the UK, which a couple of luxury French brands already do, by the way, but they're going to grow the stuff. And there are a number of farmers in the south of France, and even as far north as rainy, windswept Brittany, who now have tea plantations. So it's incredible. I mean, when you look at tea, you think, well, this is a hot weather crop. This is something that comes from India or China, but France, Brittany, it really does almost beg a belief.
And do you think it'll catch on domestically with the French? When I've been to France, you seem very much a cafe nation. Is tea the kind of tipple of choice of many of the French or not?
It is actually, yeah. I mean, obviously the French are a nation of coffee drinkers. They love a little espresso or maybe a milky coffee in the morning. But they do enjoy tea, except that their notion of what constitutes a good cup of tea is very different from ours. They tend to drink it without milk. They like it to be perfumed, possibly with fruit aromas, stuff like that. And one of their luxury tea outlets, it's called Mariage Frère, has a shop now in London. And so what they're trying to do is, rather than produce a pick-me-up cuppa, they want to appeal to connoisseurs who are going to go for what they see as the more refined flavours of tea.
OK, David Chazan, we have to leave it there. I knew the French would get tea wrong. Maybe next time we'll move on to the fry. Thanks very much for joining us. Now, Boris Johnson is throwing his weight behind the Tories' election campaign. But is it too little, too late? The big dog might be coming back. Will it be enough to save the Conservative Party from electoral oblivion? We'll have that after this break. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. But, of course, now it's your weather with Annie Shuttleworth.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Thunderstorms may start to break out over the next few hours with a warning in force for some of us, but for most areas it will stay dry through this evening and into tomorrow as well. That's because high pressure is not too far away. It's building in from the south and west for the next few days, bringing many of us plenty of fine weather. But there is a risk of thunderstorms through this evening for parts of northern England. So do take care if you're in those areas and take a closer look at the details of the warning. But for most of us, it should stay fair fairly dry this evening and overnight. There will be some cloud around, particularly across central areas of England and up towards Scotland as well. And it will turn quite cold under the clear skies, particularly across Northern Ireland and Scotland. We could see temperatures down to the low single figures overnight tonight, but there will be plenty of sunshine to start the day across northern Scotland, where it's been fairly cloudy and quite cold through the past few days with that northerly wind. It's going to be a much brighter start on Wednesday, and in Northern Ireland as well, wall-to-wall sunshine to start the day. Temperatures around 11 or 10 degrees first thing, but they will rise through the afternoon. In the south as well, plenty of sunshine to start the day. So for many of us, a very fine start to the day indeed, and there'll be plenty more fine weather to come through tomorrow. It will remain largely dry for the bulk of the UK. There's a risk of the odd shower developing here and there, but I think you'll be very unlucky to be caught in any of those showers. However, notice we do have cloud thickening from the northwest. This is the weather front approaching into parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. It will bring cloudier skies and slightly cooler weather here to end the day, but inland areas of England and Wales could see temperatures climbing towards the mid-20s. Now, through the rest of Wednesday evening, plenty of fine weather to end the day. That weather front won't make too much progress inland, although skies will remain cloudy across the far northwest of Scotland. And that pattern continues as we head to Friday and the weekend, with plenty of dry and warm weather across the south.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. To Coniston in Cumbria, the A593 shut by Shepherd's Bridge Lane and queuing. There's a collision being dealt with. There's one as well in Middlesbrough with the Martin Road. The A172's been shut by the Martin Crossroads, and that's causing queues. An obstruction on the northbound M1 causing delays around Leicester. Junction 21A up towards 22 at Colville is queuing with a lane closure in place. Coastbound heading east, the M20 in Kent. Junction 3 for the M26. Through toward Leybourne Junction 4. Now the camera showing a 2-lane combed off a broken down lorry getting recovered. That's causing delays. And in Devon, the northbound M5 struggling. Exeter at the Services Junction 30, heading north up towards Junction 29. 2-lane shut, queuing traffic. It's due to an accident. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Don't miss out on your chance to win our Summer Spectacular. And have we got a prize for you? First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction. So you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, Boris is back, and we called it on the show yesterday because the former Prime Minister is throwing his weight behind the Tories' general election campaign. But will he help Rishi Sunak, or will it all backfire? Meanwhile, there's more bad news for the Prime Minister today because GB News can reveal that more than 12,000 illegal immigrants have crossed the Channel this year alone, and more than 41,000 have arrived since Mr Sunak forlornly vowed to stop the boats. And with the Liberal Democrats' obsession with sewage and Ed Davey's election campaign being an adventure tour of pratfalls and fashion shows. Whoops, there he goes again. How did the Lib Dems go from the political wilderness to serious contenders as the opposition? We'll speak to a former Lib Dem minister. And billions have been wiped off the Paris Stock Exchange, and the euro has tanked to a 22-month low after Emmanuel Macron called a snap election to see off a rising threat from the right wing. Could France soon be bidding au revoir to their pint-sized, out-of-favour president? And that's all coming up in your next hour. What was the show? So yesterday we called it. We said, is the big dog, is Boris going to return to try and save the embattled Conservatives? Today, Rishi Sunak has confirmed Boris would make a difference. Well, he would make a difference, but would it be a good one? Would it be a bad one? Let me know what you think. Is the return of Boris Johnson a help or a hindrance to the Conservative Party? After all, was he really tough on immigration? Was he really actually a Liberal Democrat in disguise with all of his net zero policies? Or is he precisely the tonic a tired government needs? Get in touch the usual ways, and it's via gbnews.com/you'll say get them over, and I'll read out a bunch before the end of the show. But now it's your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
The Prime Minister faced questions from farmers on a visit to Devon this afternoon. Rishi Sunak said it was a privilege to understand their contribution to society before warning that 40,000 jobs could be lost as a result of Labour's plans.
Now, the contrast at this election is crystal clear. Because whilst we're going to do all those things for you, as David said, in the Labour manifesto there were just 87 words about farming. No commitment to food production and food security. No commitment at all about the farming budget in the next Parliament. Forget about increasing it like we're going to do. They won't even say that they're going to protect it. Right? Like, that is the choice for you at this election, which is why it's so important that you come out and vote and you talk to your colleagues.
Meanwhile, more than 41,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel in small boats since Rishi Sunak promised to end the crisis in January last year. GB News can reveal the figure was passed today after more than 600 migrants made the crossing earlier on this morning amid improved weather conditions. The Prime Minister says it's further evidence as to why the Rwanda policy is necessary, while the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, highlighted his party's plan to take swift action on the issue.
I think the idea of processing claims as close to source as possible is a good idea. We also need to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade, because under this Tory government, they've lost control of the borders. And we will, set up a border security command, a new elite command, with new powers and resources to smash the gangs that are running the vile trade in the first place. Because, as you rightly say, a record number have crossed the Channel this year already. And nobody but nobody should be making that journey across the Channel.
Sir Keir Starmer. Now, a review has found that 4 police detectives who ran the first investigation into the murder of Stephen Lawrence shouldn't face criminal charges. It found there was insufficient evidence and no real prospect of a conviction. It means none of the 4 retired detectives will be charged. Stephen Lawrence was murdered in 1993 in a racist attack in South London. The initial investigation was harshly criticised and failed to bring anyone to justice. Today is the last day to register to vote in the upcoming general election in July, in about 2 weeks' time. The social media campaign is urging first-time voters to ensure they're on the electoral roll after a sharp drop in turnout among younger people. Around 8 million people are estimated to be unregistered to vote. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats are promising to spend £10 million a year to tackle the practice of sewage dumping by water companies. New quality inspectors would work as part of a newly created Clean Water Authority. So Ed Davey says it's crucial that Britain's water is cleaned up.
There's nowhere near enough sewage monitors. We call them sewage busters. We want to provide £10 million in our cost of manifesto. So our new regulator, the Clean Water Authority, has the resources, because we do need a tough regulator, as we're proposing, with powers coming from other regulators, so we have a much stronger regulator. But they need the resources to do the job. And we've seen on the Conservatives cutting back the Environment Agency, where some of these monitors were. And we want to make sure the resources are there as well as the rules.
GB News continues to be your election channel. Let's follow Sir Keir Starmer on the road as he campaigns in the southeast of England. Let's listen in to what he has to say.
Whatever their background, making sure we got the police to crack down on antisocial behaviour, Great British Energy, you name it. We've got the first steps that we will be getting on from day one to deliver the change that this country so desperately needs. So we have the plan. We have the confidence and assurance in our plan. And we also have to say to everybody contemplating their vote on the 4th of July, imagine 5 more years of the Tories. 5 more years. After 14 years of chaos and decline and failure, where nobody can answer the question. It ought to be a simple question in any election. What is actually better now than 14 years ago? And they can't answer that basic question. We've seen all sorts of Conservative strategies, but they haven't gone out to the country saying, here's our brilliant record, surely you want more of this, because they know they'd be laughed at. They haven't gone out and said, look at our brilliant leadership, you know, at least you get strong leadership. So nothing to put before the country, and they're not going to change. And this is the important thing. Chaos and division have been the name of the game now for 14 years, and that's the reason for the failure. They haven't changed. Their election campaign is showing that chaos and division is still sort of defining characteristic of this Tory campaign. And so we have to say, do not allow 5 more years of this. But we also say, imagine an incoming Labour government. Imagine a government committed to rebuilding our NHS and making it fit for the future. Imagine a Labour government committed to our public services and making sure they're delivering across the piece. Imagine a Labour government prepared to set up Great British Energy, a publicly owned energy company, generating renewals to keep energy bills down for good, to creating the jobs of the future. Imagine a Labour government committed to the infrastructure build that we need, the roads, the rail that we need, the houses that we desperately need so that people can have a secure roof over their head that they can afford. Imagine the change that we can bring about with a Labour government committed to building that better future. So we have to get out there. We have to make this argument. There's a long, long way to go. Every vote counts. But the contrast in the campaigns is clear. The choice is absolutely clear. It's a straight choice. More of the chaos and division and failure that we've had over the last 14 years, because they're not going to change, or turn the page and start to rebuild our country with Labour. Let's go forward, Liv. Let's win this constituency. Let's get that Labour government. Vote Labour. Thank you very much. Thank you.
That was Sir Keir Starmer there in South East London, talking very much to a friendly crowd of activists, saying that the Conservative Party have nothing to put before the country, talking of a divided, chaotic government, as you'd no doubt expect. And imagine a Labour government, he said. Imagine the roads, imagine the rails, the housing, the change to building a better future. The contrast is clear, Sir Keir Starmer said. The choice is clear, he said, between two parties, more chaos or Time for change. That was Sir Keir Starmer on the campaign trail in South East London. Now, throughout the election campaign, we will be hearing from people across the United Kingdom about what really matters to them, issues such as NHS waiting lists, the impact of immigration, the cost of living crisis, and crime and policing. Our reporters have been to meet voters from all 4 nations and will be hearing from them regularly before polling day. Now, moving on to a story we might just have preempted on this show yesterday. With Rishi Sunak miles behind in the polls, Boris Johnson is backing the Tories in a series of videos on social media. And it's also being reported that thousands of letters signed by Mr Johnson will be sent to voters this week. You can see the video there. Boris Johnson very much being dusted off and brought back into action, recommissioned on the campaign trail. Now, Rishi Sunak said that Boris will make a difference. Well, he certainly could make a difference, but I put it to you, is it a good difference or is it a hindrance? A lot of people have been saying that Boris Johnson's campaign, his time in the sun, may be over because after he got rid of after Partygate, did the truth come out about his stance on open borders? 750,000 last year, and the year before that, pretty much the same. Is his time done, or is it time for a comeback? Let me know what you think. Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. And we're about to speak soon to Chris Hope. We're trying to get him up. But before that, today is the 40th anniversary of one of the most violent clashes in British industrial history. The Battle of Orgreave was on June the 18th, 1984, and saw striking miners and thousands of police officers clash at a coking plant near Rotherham in South Yorkshire. Anna Riley looks back on that moment in history for us.
Orgreave is now home to
Sorry, the People's thing didn't come up.
But 40 years ago, the scene here was very different.
Where all these houses are, that was all fields where most of the Battle of Orgreave took place in that area. This part, where the reservoirs are, where the lakes are, was the tip for all the waste. And it was an ideal place to stage the Battle of Orgreave, actually, because it was staged.
The former coking plant was host to one of the most brutal clashes in the miners' strike. Tensions came to a head after Arthur Scargill called for a mass picket here. The National Union of Mine Workers believed if the miners could prevent lorries carrying coke from the plant, the government would be forced to negotiate. Police were prepared. Thousands of officers from different forces carried riot shields and batons, and some on horseback bore down on picketers. Retired South Yorkshire miner David Turton is still haunted by that day.
They all came over the bridge, which is down there, just like lambs to the slaughter, for the want of a phrase. And there were 6,000 police and 40-odd mounted police and police dogs. So they weren't playing, they meant business. What happened was meant and planned, and it was so sad. And when Maggie said they are trying to replace the rule of law with the rule of the mob, nothing could have been further from the truth. Them 95 who went to court for riot, I don't think any of them 95 had been in a police station before in their lives.
At Renishaw Miners Club in South Yorkshire, the memories of that violent day live on.
I was there at Orgreave, saw innocent people getting trampled on by horses, older than me, who couldn't run, get out of way of things. People getting battered. I still get flashbacks of that now, to this day.
My husband were there that day. There's no weapons on them whatsoever, there's nothing. They just went down there to protest about the jobs. And it were meant to be violent that day. It were Thatcher's way, proving who she were.
You'd have thought people would forget about it after 40 years, but not in these kind of villages, you don't forget.
So for this community, it's important to remember this anniversary.
It's 40 years, and I think back how many of the men aren't here anymore. This was a strike to end all strikes. There will never, ever be another one like it.
In a statement, South Yorkshire Police said it would not be appropriate for the force of today to seek to explain or defend the actions of the force in 1984. We have been very clear about our intent to make as much of the relevant documentation as is possible available to the public. But this is at least 18 months away, and campaigners are still calling for an inquiry into the events at Orgreave. Anna Riley, GB News.
40 years on, still a long shadow cast by the coal strike. Now to a story we might just have preempted on this show yesterday, because with Rishi Sunak miles behind in the opinion polls, Boris Johnson is backing the Tories in a series of videos on social media. It's also been reported that thousands of letters signed by Mr Johnson will be sent to voters this week. Well, join me now to discuss this, his Conservative peer, Lord Jonathan Marland. Lord Marland, thank you very much for joining us. So, is it time for the comeback kid? Is it time for Boris to dust off his bulldozer and do what he does best and steam in to save the day? Or, actually, why should he save Rishi Sunak, the man many think stabbed him in the back?
Well, he's a Conservative is the first thing. And secondly, he wants to see his legacy as a part of the Conservative government of the 14 years being cherished rather than trashed. So it's the right thing to do, and I'm glad he's doing it, particularly as he's limbering up for his 60th birthday this weekend.
So it's one thing to send a couple of videos on TikTok, that's easy peasy. It's easy as well to send letters. Do you think we'll see him returning to the stump? And if so, do you think it'll be backing candidates, pro-Johnsonite, friends and family, as it were, or will he actually appear alongside the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak?
Well, we'll see. And as I said, I'll have a better idea when I've seen him this weekend. But, you know, as I said earlier, he wants to see his the Conservatives re-elected. Any Conservative would want to. And he has got that magic touch which people like to see and hear. And he's a very charismatic politician. It's good to see him back actively supporting the Conservative Party and indeed the Prime Minister.
It's fair to say Boris, in his pomp, in his heyday, in his prime, would be an electoral asset. But Lord Marland, of course, after Partygate and the spluttering end to his political career, does Boris Johnson now bring baggage that could be a hindrance? And furthermore, with the benefit of hindsight, can we actually learn now that Boris was actually quite a liberal on things like net zero, quite a liberal on things like soft border control, all of those things promised in 2019 to get Brexit done, they never really materialised?
Well, I think a lot of things did materialise. He got us through COVID, and we were the first Western world country really to have vaccines and to get the country going again. He was very strong on Ukraine. Yes, he has some views which some people might describe as liberal, some people might describe as reasonable. And why wouldn't he? You know, most people do have compassionate views when it comes to immigration and such like issues. But he's a very charismatic character. He does divide opinion, obviously, but those people who love him continue to love him, and he's got that X factor, and that's why I'm on your programme, because you, as a member of the mighty media, have a fascination for Boris, and rightly so, because he's an amazingly charismatic politician.
So, Lord Marland, indulge me here. Let's go some chess moves ahead.
It'll be a pleasure to indulge you.
Let's go some chess moves ahead. Is this actually about a political comeback for Boris Johnson after the Great Forest Fire, which many expect out of this general election? All eyes are on what the Conservative Party is going to rebuild itself. What mould will it be rebuilt in? Could this be a segue for Boris to get back in, maybe in a by-election? And I said, indulge me here, could this be Boris making a play to head off the very real and emerging threat of a certain Mr Nigel Farage, who himself has eyes on rebuilding the Conservative movement?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's hard to say what Boris wants to do. There'll always be people who phone him up and say, Boris, we need you back. You're the only person who can save the country. Of course, when he left office last time, within weeks they were asking him to come back when he was on holiday in the Caribbean. And you asked me on your programme, you know, should he come back? And my advice to him was don't. He'll consider, obviously, the desire, should we lose the election, which with any luck we won't, people will come to him and say, you know, Boris, we need you back. He'll consider it, I'm sure, and then he'll make a decision. You know, as you rightly point out, and you're an observer of all this as much as I am, he's not an elected politician. He would have to get a seat. Seats don't become available overnight. If the polls suggest we're going to have a disastrous election, there are going to be very few seats available. But I'm sure that won't be the case. So he would have to do that. And I mean, I heard a rumour today from someone told me that David Cameron was thinking of renouncing his peerage and running again for Parliament. I think that's highly unlikely as well. So there'll always be, as inevitably is, if the party were to lose, and it's a big if, a jostling for position of leadership and people considering their roles within it.
So, Lord Morland, finally, we've seen stranger things happen. Are you thinking a Rocky Balboa-style comeback is what the Conservative Party needs? And is Boris punching the heavyweights to return? Is that what you want to see?
It's not what I want to see. I want to see us win this election, and then we'll see what happens after that. Boris has got that X factor, and you mentioned Nigel Farage. Many people say he's got that X factor. Certainly, Keir Starmer doesn't have that X factor, and people like politicians with X factor, and they're fascinated by them as you have been with those two characters. So we'll see what happens after the election. At the moment, there's no danger of him trying to usurp the leadership. Why would he? He's not an elected politician.
OK, superb, sir. Thank you very much for joining us and indulging me, Lord Jonathan Morland. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Now, our political editor, Chris Hope, is spending the day with the Conservatives. Chris, welcome to the show. You may well have heard there, Lord Morland seemed very, very excited about the return of the comeback kid, the big dog, Boris Johnson. The big question is, though, would Boris be a help or a hindrance to the Conservatives in 2024, Chris?
It depends if he's leading the party, Martin. You heard there from Lord Morland, even David Cameron could renounce his peerage and come back as an MP. But what this is ignoring is the fact you have to become an MP first. And the election, neither David Cameron nor Boris Johnson are standing.
Looks like Chris Hope is caught.
Fields, very narrow roads. In fact, the bus is now reversing because we're stuck between some very narrow hedges. Not sure if you can see us going backwards at the moment. We'll forget any metaphors from that about the Tory campaign. But in many ways, we spoke earlier to Rishi Sunak about the issue of Boris Johnson and whether he needs to play a bigger role in the campaign. And here's what he had to say.
I don't think it's there, Chris. Chris, let's move on. We hear all the time about political U-turns. Chris Hope, we just saw the Tory battle bus perform one.
That's right, all the time, yes. I mean, exactly. The issue here then, we're on a very narrow road and it's difficult for Mr Sunak. Earlier, he was here feeding some sheep, which chose not to be fed by him. I think he thought they were expecting to be sheared by him rather than fed, but the sheep ran away. So on the road with these politicians, there's risk everywhere, and metaphors can come up and be a problem for you. But there's no question, I think, that a lot of people in the grassroots, the base, who voted Tory back in 2019 would like to see Boris.
OK, I think we're going to have to come off this feed there, Chris. You are, of course, in the depths of North Devon, the depths of rural Breton. And every time we go on these campaign trails, we say the same thing. Maybe politicians should pledge to get better broadband. Now, if you thought Rishi Sunak was wrong to call a snap election, then Emmanuel Macron might have made an even bigger mistake when he did the same thing, because politics in France is being turned on its head. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. Gosh.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The woke be with you these days, not the force be with you. And Star Wars, you know, it was the one thing as a kid that brought me and my brother together pretty close, and I love it with all my heart. But ever since Disney took it over, this diversity, equity and inclusion has run rampant throughout it. And actually we've had the actress from the latest Star Wars spin-off, a series on Disney, actually saying that making white people cry was actually what she wanted to do. Have a listen.
When people watch The Hate You Give, what do you want them to walk away with? Because I know everyone has a slightly different feeling.
Well, I mean, white people crying actually was the goal.
Yeah, so that diversity, equity and inclusion running rampant throughout Hollywood and ruining really good franchises. Actually ensuring, apparently, R2-D2, the little robot, you know, that scoots about and gets on the starships and all the rest of it, apparently that could be a lesbian now.
She's half white, this actress. This is what I don't understand. She's half Danish, then half African-American.
I have skin in this game, as you know, with a mixed-race child. Nobody ever sees a mixed-race child as half white. They see them as black.
We used to say that to focus on the colour of someone's skin was rampant racism and therefore we ought to reject it. Now we're saying actually potentially the only thing that we should notice about a person is the colour of their skin.
I don't really think she was actually wanting white people to be sobbing, and it wasn't malicious, but it's just this silly kind of ruination of something that's meant to be entertainment and fun. I wouldn't go as far as to say Star Wars is art. I'm not.
I love Star.
It is, you know, excluding people. Yeah. It's actually dividing people. Once again, by the colour of their skin, we are teaching people to not like each other.
The People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to 4:27. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, it's emerged that London once again has Europe's biggest stock market, and it's all thanks to Emmanuel Macron, because Macron's decision to call a snap election has led to a sharp fall in the value of companies listed in Paris. Funny enough, Paris overtook London back in 2022, not long after Liz Truss's mini budget. Well, let's cross now to Paris and speak to journalist Peter Allen. Peter, welcome to the show. So, sacre bleu, Emmanuel Macron calls a snap election, €6 billion wiped off the stock market in Paris, 22-month low on the euro, and now people are saying this is a political gamble, not only crash the economy, but could cost him his presidency. Tell us more.
Yes, he's in a lot of self-imposed misfortune, really, Martin. As you say, the CAC 40 has dropped significantly, and the economy hasn't been doing particularly well anyway, but it's even worse now. And Emmanuel Macron is almost going to the polls on a point of principle. He's not standing, I hasten to add. He's never been an MP in his life. I'm pretty sure he's never actually visited the French Parliament, which says something about the French presidential system. But he feels that there was this huge vote for the National Rally, Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella's party, just over a week ago now. And he says because they got such a huge share of the vote, 32%, in European elections, then they deserve a chance to see what they will get domestically. Remember, Europe isn't hugely important to the French people. They return about 82 MEPs each time on these elections. But of course, the domestic election is far more important. 577 seats up for grabs, which is for the National Assembly, which is sort of the equivalent of the House of Commons in Britain. So very, very important elections. And Emmanuel Macron's prepared to take the risk of, as you say, crashing the economy, of causing all kinds of other problems in order, he says, for democracy to be allowed and for people to really see if they genuinely want the National Rally in any kind of power, Martin.
And Peter, to look ahead, to extrapolate, if we could, is this a gamble? Do you think that Macron knows the French presidential system is stacked in favour of those who are incumbent? They can do all kinds of deals to keep Le Pen out of office. Is that his plan? Is he like saying, show us your medals to try and defeat them now? Or do you think there is a chance that at that presidential election level, there could be a repeat of what we saw at the EU elections, and Macron might be in for the mother of all upsets?
Well, it depends whether you look at it in the short term or the long term. I think that's really the answer to that one, Martin. For example, these parliamentary elections will initially have no influence on who's president of France at all. All that will happen is that what is already a very chaotic, divided, and really pretty ineffective parliament will be replaced by one that is potentially just as ineffective, just as divided, and one that really doesn't show anything except that the president is all important in France. If you look beyond these current parliamentary elections, if there is a huge vote for the National Rally, and indeed they get an absolute majority, then we're really talking of a huge sea change in French politics. For example, if the National Rally gets a majority, an absolute majority, they could quite likely produce a prime minister. Prime ministers are nothing like as important in France as they are in Britain, of course, but it'd be hugely significant if the National Rally's Jordan Bardella, he would be the obvious prime minister, becomes prime minister at 28. He would have to work with Emmanuel Macron. I think that wouldn't work very well at all. But of course, what it would do is set up the National Rally for a vote in 2027 when their candidate is almost certainly going to be Marine Le Pen. She'll be trying for the fourth time of asking to become president. And then that would be a massive story. That would be a very, very strong chance of her becoming president then. And for the first time in history, the National Rally finally producing a president. They've been knocking on the door for many years. There's nothing new about any of this. 2002, Marine Le Pen's father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, he came second in the election. What they did then, they produced what is known as a Republican pact, everybody voting for anybody who wasn't the National Rally, and that worked very well from their point of view. There's another front like that. It's called the New Popular Front this time, and they are trying to lock out the National Rally in parliamentary elections.
OK, Peter, and we have to leave it there. Fascinating stuff. What a game of high-stakes poker. Will it spectacularly backfire on Emmanuel Macron? Of course, we'll bring you all the latest on that as it happens, and there's more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. But first, your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you. We start this bulletin with some breaking news. The leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, says he's definitely going to abolish the TV licence fee which funds the BBC in his contract with the people. The Reform UK leader was speaking during a town hall-style event in Clacton-on-Sea, where he's standing to become an MP. That comes as the BBC said it would allow Reform to take part in an extra Question Time Leader Special after Mrs Farage's team complained about being left out. That news just in. Well, also in the news today, the Prime Minister faced questions from farmers on a visit to Devon this afternoon. Rishi Sunak saying it was a privilege to understand their contribution to society before warning that 40,000 jobs could be lost as a result of Labour's plans.
Now, the contrast at this election is crystal clear. Because whilst we're going to do all those things for you, as David said, in the Labour manifesto, there were just 87 words about farming. No commitment to food production and food security. No commitment at all about the farming budget in the next Parliament. Forget about increasing it like we're going to do. They won't even say that they're going to protect it. right? Like, that is the choice for you at this election, which is why it's so important that you come out and vote and you talk to your colleagues.
Rishi Sunak. Meanwhile, more than 41,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel since Rishi Sunak promised to stop the boats. The Prime Minister says it's further evidence for the Rwanda policy, and Sir Keir Starmer, though, points to Labour's plan to set up the new Border Security Command. And a review has found that 4 detectives who ran the first investigation into the murder of Stephen Lawrence shouldn't face criminal charges. It found there was insufficient evidence and no real prospect of a conviction. Stephen Lawrence was murdered in 1993 in a racist attack in South London. The initial investigation was harshly criticised and failed to bring anyone to justice. Those are the headlines. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now, in a few minutes, we'll bring you the latest from the trial of a man accused of murdering a so-called Good Samaritan. But first, there's a new way to get in touch with us here at GB News, and here's Bev Turner with all of the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Coniston in Cumbria and the A593 remain shut by Shepherd's Bridge Lane and queuing at the scene of an accident. There's one as well that means Martin Road in Middlesbrough by the crossroads is closed, again for the same reason, so slow going. Skindlesby in Lincolnshire struggling. The Bluestone Heath Road is shut by the Claxby turn-off and queuing again. It's due to a collision. Now slow northbound up the M1, a lane shut away from Kirby Muxloe, 21A up to Colville Junction 22. A slow going back towards the Leicester Forest East services. There's an obstruction blocking a lane there. Lots of traffic heading into South Wales towards the Principality Stadium as Taylor Swift plays the Eras Tour there this evening. The M4 westbound queuing for 45 minutes from junction 23A to the Bringlass tunnels. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Mark Dolan tonight. Weekends from 9 p.m.
Good news regarding Princess Catherine. That's right, she's made her first much anticipated public appearance of the year at the annual Trooping the Colour parade. There were cheers from the waiting crowd as they caught their first glimpse of Catherine and the King heading from Buckingham Palace to Horse Guards parade. The weather did not dampen people's spirits, did it?
Absolutely not. It actually made it more fun because when the rain would stop, everyone would start cheering.
Yes, definitely. What is your verdict on how Catherine looked, first of all? Just her health, her demeanour, her body language?
Well, first of all, stunning. I mean, you can't deny that she looked absolutely incredible. My Fair Lady, she looked like Audrey Hepburn in the outfit she was wearing, the black and white.
Let's get some pictures, if we can, of Catherine, because I'd like your verdict on the outfit. She was dressed in white?
Yes, she looked very angelic, didn't she?
Yeah, so it's a white, very smart suit, though.
She looks so sophisticated, obviously, so smart. And she just is, it's what we've come to expect from her. I would expect nothing less.
Yeah, very pointed shoulder pads and a very smart hat as well. Quite stately, I think, her look. Yeah. And what about the body language between herself and her husband, William? I mean...
Flirt alert.
Right.
There are some pictures of them. Get a room. Yeah, there are some pictures of them looking at each other where, I mean, my heart fell into my stomach. It's just so sweet.
By some miracle of coincidence, it seems that Meghan Markle has launched a product around this time.
I predicted this over a week ago, that Meghan would launch something would come up. You know, Harry and Meghan burn lots of bridges. You don't go posting a gift from Meghan Markle without permission from Meghan Markle.
The People's Channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:40. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, the trial started of a man accused of murdering a so-called Good Samaritan by hitting them with their car. Chris Marriott died after he helped an unconscious woman at the side of the road in Sheffield last December. And Hassan Janga is charged with murder. Let's get the latest now with GB News Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley, who's been at the court today. Anna, a hugely upsetting story at the time that captivated the nation. What's the latest?
Yes, Martin. Well, a jury here at Sheffield Crown Court today heard that Good Samaritan and father of two, 46-year-old Chris Marriott, was killed instantly when he tried to help a stranger he saw lying in the street when he was hit by a car. Prosecutors say this happened when a car was used as a weapon to run over a number of people on the 27th of December last year on College Close, a residential area in the Burngreave area of Sheffield. 24-year-old Hassan Janga denies the murder of Chris Marriott but has admitted to causing death by dangerous driving. The prosecution told the jury that Chris was out on a post-Christmas walk with his wife and two children when he saw a lady laying in the street and went to give her assistance. The jury heard that as that was happening, that Chris Marriott was joined by an off-duty midwife who was also giving assistance, as well as the mother of the woman who was also Hassan Janga's sister lying in the street. And then the jury heard that Chris and the others were ploughed into by Hassan Janga, who drove his Seat Ibiza car into them before getting out of the vehicle and attacking another man with a knife, leaving him with serious injuries. The court heard that the background to the incident was a dispute between the Janga family and the Khan family, and that Hassan Janga's sister had had the marriage to Hassan Khan that morning of the 27th of December at a local mosque, and that the Janga family disagreed with the location and the timing of the wedding, and that's when the dispute began, and that's when Hassan was called out and drove to the scene. The court also heard that Hassan Janga denies charges of attempted murder, causing serious injury by dangerous driving, 4 counts of causing grievous bodily harm and wounding with intent. His father, 56-year-old Mohammed Janga, was also in the dock alongside him, charged with perjury in relation to concealing a knife in his car. This is something that he denies. This trial continues and is expected to last for the next 5 weeks, and when we have further updates, we will bring them.
Thank you, Anna Riley, with that update live from Sheffield. Now, coming up next, I'll speak to Annalise Dodds, Labour Minister.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Thunderstorms may start to break out over the next few hours with a warning in force for some of us, but for most areas it will stay dry through this evening and into tomorrow as well. That's because high pressure is not too far away. It's building in from the south and west for the next few days, bringing many of us plenty of fine weather. But there is a risk of thunderstorms through this evening for parts of northern England. So do take care if you're in those areas and take a closer look at the details of the warning. But for most of us, it should stay fairly dry this evening and overnight. There will be some cloud around, particularly across central areas of England and up towards Scotland as well. And it will turn quite cold under the clear skies, particularly across Northern Ireland and Scotland. We could see temperatures down to the low single figures overnight tonight, but there will be plenty of sunshine to start the day across northern Scotland, where it's been fairly cloudy and quite cold through the past few days with that northerly wind. It's going to be a much brighter start on Wednesday, and in Northern Ireland as well. Wall-to-wall sunshine to start the day. Temperatures around 11 or 10 degrees first thing, but they will rise through the afternoon. In the south as well, plenty of sunshine to start the day. So for many of us, a very fine start to the day indeed. And there'll be plenty more fine weather to come through tomorrow. It will remain largely dry for the bulk of the UK. There's a risk of the odd shower developing here and there, but I think you'll be very unlucky to be caught in any of those showers. However, notice we do have cloud thickening from the northwest. This is the weather front approaching into parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. It will bring cloudier skies and slightly cooler weather here to end the day, but inland areas of England and Wales could see temperatures climbing towards the mid-20s. Now, through the rest of Wednesday evening, plenty of fine weather to end the day. That weather front won't make too much progress inland, although skies will remain cloudy across the far northwest of Scotland. And that pattern continues as we head to Friday and the weekend, with plenty of dry and warm weather across the south.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Don't miss a special edition of State of the Nation with Michael Portillo tonight and tomorrow night at 8 p.m. right here on GB News. Now, welcome back to the show. I'm Martin Daubney. It's 4:45. This is GB News. Now, the Labour Party has unveiled new plans to protect the Great British Pub. Right to buy powers will be given to communities to stop boozers from being boarded up. And this comes as Sir Keir Starmer signalled his support for a beer duty freeze in order to back the beleaguered hospitality industry. Well, I'm now joined to discuss this by the Labour Party Chair and Shadow Women and Equalities Secretary, Annalise Dodds. Annalise, thanks for joining us again. It's always a delight to have your company. Before we talk about pubs, can I just ask you quickly about something Rachel Reeves said earlier on today, intimating closer ties once again with the European Union. Now, Annalise, a lot of people have been thinking that the Labour Party is going to Brussels with that red rose between your teeth. They think you want to jump back into bed with Brussels. Is that true? Is this the beginning of a realignment with the European Union from the Labour Party?
Well, goodness me, that's quite an image that you've set out there. Look, Labour's been really clear. People have decided that they want to leave the EU. That vote has happened. We're definitely really clear we do not want to rejoin the EU. We will not rejoin the single market or the customs union. There won't be a return to freedom of movement. But what we will do is reset the relationship in our own country's interest. You know, you've got other nations like Australia, for example, that have got a veterinary agreement with the EU. That means there's much less red tape when it comes to food being traded between the EU and Australia. You know, our country should have that kind of a deal as well, also when it comes to security cooperation with the EU. So we would be seeking to reset the relationship, but definitely not the kind of rolling back on that original decision.
That sounds like death by 1,000 treaties. That does sound like being more enmeshed with the bureaucracy of Brussels.
Well, actually, what we've got now is extra bureaucracy that's costing not just British businesses, but also British consumers as well when they're trying to get their shopping, because of the extra red tape that we have at some of our borders, because we don't have that kind of veterinary deal in place. It means ultimately that we've got food being held up, that we're not able to trade in the way that we should be able to trade. And as I said, many countries outside the EU, like Australia, for example, have got a veterinary deal with the EU. So we've said this for a very long time, that we need to reset the relationship with these kinds of very practical changes, all of which we've already set out, so that we can be putting our own country's best foot forward. And above all, as I said, when it comes to food, actually getting that cost down.
And Annalise, the Conservative Party, getting very excited today about a potential return of Boris Johnson. Is that something that you'd welcome also from the Labour Party's point of view?
Well, I have to say that we would prefer not to have any Conservative Prime Ministers in power, whether that's previous ones or indeed the current one. We think the only way to get the change that our country needs is by having that change towards a Labour government. That's the only way that we're going to get rid of the kind of chaos, division and decline that we've seen over the last 14 years.
OK, Annalise, you're here to talk about the Labour Party's plans to save the beleaguered British booze. Something we care about a great deal here on GB News. Yesterday, we covered the fact 80 pubs every single month are closing down. Tell us, how do you plan to breathe life back into our boozers?
So right now, in theory, communities are able to take over pubs that are about to close, but the process is really, really difficult. It's very hard for them, ultimately, to compete against property developers, for example, and that means that you're only seeing these kinds of community-run pubs happening in a very small number of cases. I've got one in my area. I'm really proud of it. It's a brilliant community-run pub. But as I say, there's very, very few of them. Well, Labour would change that. Would make it much easier for communities to come in to run those pubs. Would make sure, for example, people had a year to bid to run the pub so that they can run it for the community. And, you know, the results speak for themselves. When communities are able to be running pubs, the pub then is the hub. It's a great place, of course, for people to come and drink, but also a place for people to socialise. You see lots of different services being run out of them. They're really important places, and we need to do something to stop, as you say, the Great British Pub just being lost because they are closing down in so many of our communities.
Now, Annalise, this is getting me excited. I get heartbroken when I see pubs boarded up, but how would you short-circuit the fact that big landlords just sit on properties, they want them to be converted into flats, or the big chains, they can simply outbid communities? How would you make sure that the locals got first stab at their local?
Well, at the moment, it's just too difficult most of the time for communities to get ready to take on their local pub. They've only got 6 months to do it. Now, 6 months is not very long if you've not been involved in that kind of thing before, if you've got to get the paperwork together. Now, we have seen, as I've said, a few cases where communities have been able to do that, and it's worked really well. But 6 months is not long enough. We've said we would extend that period to a whole year. That's effectively giving communities first dib, giving them that proper chance so that they can get ready to be able to run these pubs for the sake of the community. And what we actually find is that when communities are running pubs, they tend to be very sustainable, they tend to work very well, they tend to have a healthy balance sheet, and they tend to be that hub for local people. So it's a win-win all round, really.
Superb stuff. Annalise Dodds, thanks very much for joining us, Labour Party Chair and supporting the Great British Boozer. Thank you very much for joining us here on GB News. Well, what do you reckon about that? I mean, a lot of people complain about pubs being boarded up. I certainly do. It breaks my heart when I see pubs just sitting there wasted. But can this plan work? As I said, what happens all the time is that the big chains simply outbid the locals, or the landlords sit on it until the property rots because they want to change it into flats. But should the government be getting involved in that sort of thing? Or is that the free market? Now, loads of you have been getting in touch. Let's get through a few of your says before the end of this hour. Jeff says this: the absolutely only way that the Tories will get my vote is to dump net zero completely. Boris is no help on that front, to be honest, as he started the rot. Mark adds this: say what you like about Ed Davey, he can still run a good campaign. Unlike Nigel Farage, and Rishi Sunak. There you go. Ed Davey has got a fan on GB News. Mark is happy with Ed's performance. Adrian adds this: it's really worrying that Labour is going to be the next government. I really hope the prediction is wrong for all of our sakes. And John adds this: Ed Davey's Liberal Democrat Party is in solidarity with Labour, not the opposition. And we've had hundreds of comments already. I'll read some out in the next hour about that breaking news. Nigel Farage set to abolish the BBC licence fee. Now, that's all for this hour, but please stay with me as I've lots more to come, including on that campaign trail with the Tories. We'll be out with the Labour Party, and also that breaking news, as I discussed, Nigel Farage set to abolish the BBC licence fee. Would that get your vote? I'm Martin Daubney on Britain's News Channel. Here's your weather with Annie Shuttleworth.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Thunderstorms may start to break out over the next few hours with a warning in force for some of us, but for most areas it will stay dry through this evening and into tomorrow as well. That's because high pressure is not too far away. It's building in from the south and west for the next few days, bringing many of us plenty of fine weather. But there is a risk of thunderstorms through this evening for parts of northern England. So do take care if you're in those areas and take a closer look at the details of the warning. But for most of us, it should stay fairly dry this evening and overnight. There will be some cloud around, particularly across central areas of England and up towards Scotland as well. And it will turn quite cold under the clear skies, particularly across Northern Ireland and Scotland. We could see temperatures down to the low single figures overnight tonight, but there will be plenty of sunshine to start the day across northern Scotland, where it's been fairly cloudy and quite cold through the past few days with that northerly wind. It's going to be a much brighter start on Wednesday, and in Northern Ireland as well, wall-to-wall sunshine to start the day. Temperatures around 11 or 10 degrees first thing, but they will rise through the afternoon. In the south as well, plenty of sunshine to start the day. So for many of us, a very fine start to the day indeed, and there'll be plenty more fine weather to come through tomorrow. It will remain largely dry for the bulk of the UK. There's a risk of the odd shower developing here and there, but I think you'll be very unlucky to be caught in any of those showers. However, notice we do have cloud thickening from the northwest. This is the weather front approaching into parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. It will bring cloudier skies and slightly cooler weather here to end the day, but inland areas of England and Wales could see temperatures climbing towards the mid-20s. Now, through the rest of Wednesday evening, plenty of fine weather to end the day. That weather front won't make too much progress inland, although skies will remain cloudy across the far northwest of Scotland. And that pattern continues as we head to Friday and the weekend, with plenty of dry and warm weather across the south.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. The southbound M74 is struggling just down towards the Wraith interchange. That's junction 5 for the Bellshill bypass. A lane blocked on the exit slip there. There's a breakdown. At Tyne and Wear, the western bypass southbound, the A1 junction 73 to 72. That's the Blaydon Concept turn-off down towards the Swalwell junction. Now, that is closed for emergency repairs. Now, that is causing queues. Northbound M1 struggling. Kirby Muxlow 21A up towards Ashby Delazuka junction 22. Early obstructions clear, though, but still slow going. Anti-clockwise M25 slow just after junction 16 following a previous bump. All lanes open. And into Wales, westbound M4 stop-start for 45 minutes from Mega 23A towards the Bringlass tunnels towards Newport. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
There's still time to win our Summer Spectacular with an incredible trio of treats, and you could win them. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said Storm.
You made my argument for me.
What
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, Boris is back, and we called it on this show yesterday afternoon because the former Prime Minister is throwing his weight behind the Tories' general election campaign. But will he help Rishi Sunak, or will it all spectacularly backfire? And with the Liberal Democrats' obsession with sewage and Ed Davey's election campaign being an adventure tour of pratfalls, there he goes again, and fashion shows. How did the Liberal Democrats go from the political wilderness to serious contenders as the opposition? We'll speak to a former Liberal Democrat minister. And doctors at the BMA are campaigning to reduce Britain's drink drive limits to as little as 1 pint of beer equivalent, or just a half a pint for newly qualified drivers. But those against say that this would kill off Britain's already endangered rural pubs. That's all coming up in your next hour. Runs the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. Once again, Nigel Farage put the cat amongst the pigeons in this last half hour. He's announced that the Reform Party would abolish the BBC licence fee. Would that get your vote? Is that what you'd like to see? Put the BBC back to a subscription service in an era of on-demand television. Is that the right thing to do? Or should we cherish our state broadcaster as a part of the national fabric? Let me know what you think on that. Plus, do you want Boris Johnson back on the campaign trail? Hundreds have already emailed in. I've got to say, perhaps surprisingly, most of you think Boris is better off sitting this one out. Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. It's your show as well as mine. But before the next hour, let's have your headlines, and it's Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Well, the Prime Minister faced questions from farmers on a visit to Devon this afternoon. Rishi Sunak saying it was a privilege to understand their contribution to society before warning that 40,000 jobs could be lost as a result of Labour's plans.
Now, the contrast at this election is crystal clear. Because whilst we're going to do all those things for you, as David said, in the Labour manifesto, there were just 87 words about farming. No commitment to food production and food security. No commitment at all about the farming budget in the next Parliament. Forget about increasing it like we're going to do. They won't even say that they're going to protect it. Right? Like, that is the choice for you at this election, which is why it's so important that you come out and vote and you talk to your colleagues.
Rishi Sunak speaking earlier on today. Well, more than 41,000 migrants have now crossed the English Channel in small boats since Rishi Sunak promised to end the crisis in January last year. GB News can reveal that the figure was indeed passed today after more than 600 migrants made the crossing earlier on this morning amid improved weather conditions. The Prime Minister says it's further evidence as to why the Rwanda policy is necessary, while the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer highlighted his party's plan to take swift action.
I think the idea of processing claims as close to source as possible is a good idea. We also need to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade, because under this Tory government, they've lost control of the borders. And we will, set up a border security command, a new elite command, with new powers and resources to smash the gangs that are running the vile trade in the first place, because, as you rightly say, a record number have crossed the Channel this year already, and nobody should be making that journey across the Channel.
Sir Keir Starmer. Now, Nigel Farage has said he'd abolish the television licence fee, which funds the BBC. The Reform UK leader was speaking during a town hall-style event this afternoon. It comes as the BBC said it would allow Reform to take part in an extra Question Time Leaders special after Mr Farage's team complained about being left out. Today is the last day to register to vote in the upcoming general election, which takes place in around 2 weeks' time. A social media campaign is urging first-time voters to make sure they're on the electoral roll after a sharp drop in turnout among younger people. Around 8 million people are estimated to be unregistered to vote at the current time. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats are promising to spend £10 million every year to tackle the practice of sewage dumping by water companies. New quality inspectors would work as part of a newly created Clean Water Authority. Sir Ed Davey says it's crucial that Britain's water is cleaned up.
There's nowhere near enough sewage monitors. We call them sewage busters. We want to provide £10 million in our cost manifesto, so our new regulator, the Clean Water Authority, has the resources, because we do need a tough regulator, as we're proposing, with powers coming from other regulators, so we have a much stronger regulator, but they need the resources to do the job. And we've seen on the Conservatives cutting back the Environment Agency, where some of these monitors were, and we want to make sure the resources are there as well as the rules.
In other news today, a review has found that 4 police detectives who ran the first investigation into the murder of Stephen Lawrence should not face criminal charges. It found there was insufficient evidence and no real prospect of a conviction. It means none of the 4 retired detectives are going to be charged. Stephen Lawrence was murdered in 1993 in a racist attack in South London. The initial investigation was heavily criticised and failed to bring anyone to justice for the crime. International news, and the Russian president will arrive in North Korea shortly for his first state visit in 24 years. Vladimir Putin is expected to receive a warm welcome in the isolated country. He's due to hold a meeting with Kim Jong-un, who he's praised for firmly supporting the invasion of Ukraine, before continuing to Vietnam later this week. And finally, the French actress Anouk Aimée has died at the age of 92. She became famous for her sophisticated performances in a string of classic films throughout the 1950s and 60s, including La Dolce Vita, 8½, and A Man and a Woman, which earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. She made her last screen appearance in 2019 and credited her long career to always listening to her colleagues and not taking herself too seriously. Not bad advice for us all. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on the screen, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now we start with a story that we might just have preempted on this very show yesterday afternoon. With Rishi Sunak miles behind in the polls, Boris Johnson is backing the Tories in a series of videos on social media. It's also been reported that thousands of letters signed by Mr Johnson will be sent to voters this week. Well, our political editor Chris Hope is on the Conservative battle bus. Chris, welcome to the show. Astonishing, this comeback. Is it the right thing for the Conservative Party, Chris? I put this to the viewers earlier. I want to read a few of these comments out. Chris, we've had a surprising amount of scepticism from GBNews viewers. I'd like to read a few of them out to you. Mark says this: bringing back Bojo would literally be like Sir Keir Starmer bringing back Corbyn for the next 2 weeks. Sally said it was Sunak who stabbed Boris in the back, along with a few others. The country did not vote for Sunak. Boris should not support Mr. Sunak. Franny says, I love Boris, but he's not going to get my vote. Perhaps surprisingly, Chris Obe, a lot of people out here saying Boris has had his day.
Hi Martin, and that might explain why Boris Johnson is keeping his powder dry. He's doing some form of support. He's sending messages on social media by video to candidates on the Tory side who want it. He's part of a letter writing campaign. Earlier we spoke to the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak about that very matter. It looks like a random attempt to help the party and not very full-throated. But Mr. Sunak did tell us that he felt it was organised by CCHQ. This is what.
Well, it's great that Boris is supporting the Conservative Party. I very much welcome that. He's endorsing many candidates in videos and letters which have been coordinated by the campaign. I know that will make a difference. And of course, every week he's making the case in his column and making sure that everyone understands that what a Labour government would do to this country and why it's important that everyone votes Conservative. And I'm glad he's doing that.
That's the Prime Minister earlier on the coast of North Devon, making very clear that he thinks that Boris Johnson is doing him some help and some support. We've just been meeting with Rishi Sunak with farmers further inland in North Devon. He's made very clear he tried to tempt some sheep to be fed by him, but they kept running away. Some would say there was a metaphor there with the way the electorate are treating him and his party in this campaign, but we'll leave that thought there. He thinks that maybe they thought he was going to try and shear the sheep and take their wool off. But anyway, we've been seeing him here. He was asked also, did he feel that it was a bit too presidential? Where were the other senior figures in the cabinet helping him campaign? And he pointed out that David Cameron, on his first campaign visit with Mr. Sunak, was here today. So Cameron was there. Elsewhere, we've seen Penny Mordaunt. Grant Shapps is rarely off a Zoom call, it seems, or a Zoom interview with GBNews. So he is trying to show there is a full team out there campaigning. He also made an announcement to us of some sort. He said that if you vote Conservative, there will be no rebanding, no revaluation of council tax bans for 5 years. That's something which Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, couldn't say earlier today in a radio phone-in.
OK, let's see if that's enough to get some votes. Chris, could I also talk to you about an extraordinary story from Reform leader Nigel Farage and Richard Tice, the party chairman? They've obviously been getting grilled a lot about a few bad apples, candidates that have slipped through the net, and now they're turning their guns on the vetting company they hired to screen these candidates, and they're accusing this company of a political stitch-up. Tell us more.
Yeah, it's complicated, this one. So back in April, Reform UK hired a company called vetting.com. They paid it, they said, £144,000 to vet its candidates for what we all thought then was a November general election. But the early calling of the election by Rishi Sunak, which no one forecast apart from a few people around the PM, has meant that the proper vetting wasn't done. Now, vetting.com admit it wasn't done. They said they've had problems having to get candidate consent to get the dates of birth and the personal data required to do checks on these candidates, and that's resulted, according to Reform UK, with some embarrassing headlines, with one candidate expressing a degree of sympathy for Adolf Hitler, another one saying it was wrong to fight Hitler in the Second World War, others making similar remarks which are difficult to defend for Nigel Farage when he's challenged. He has said today that he thinks that vetting.com is co-owned by a former Boris Johnson advisor. He says this meant that it was doing the work of the Tory party. For vetting.com, they say that the person who owns the company was an advisor, but he is politically neutral, and that has had no bearing on the work of vetting.com. Reform.uk are saying we might go to lawyers, the police have been talked about. It's a big battle here. They are trying to say we did all we could as a party to vet people. We even paid someone a lot of donors' money to do it, but that work wasn't done properly. I mean, vetting.com, as I said, do make clear they did all they could to try and vet the candidates. They also don't want to litigate, they say, this in public, and they say that vetting.com sends Reform all its best wishes as they shake up the UK political landscape.
An astonishing twist on what's been an astonishing general election campaign trail. Thank you, Chris Hope, live there from the Conservative battle bus, tearing around the country lanes of North Devon. Now we'll hear from a government minister live on GB News at around 5:45, and you get loads more on the Tories election campaign on our website. And thanks to you, GBNews.com is the fastest growing national news website in the country. It's got breaking news and all of the brilliant analysis you come to expect from GB News. Now, here's something that I definitely didn't expect to be saying just a couple of weeks ago. And is Sir Ed Davey about to become the leader of the opposition? Well, in the last few weeks, Sir Ed seemed to be on one long adventure holiday around the UK. Started off by paddleboarding, way man overboard, where he ended up, as you can see there, in Lake Windermere. And the next day, he got on his bike in Wales, as you can see there too. And luckily this time, he kept his balance. Now, the Liberal Democrat leader got wet again when he threw himself down a water slide. What a donut, as you can see. Now, it's really been getting stuck into all of these challenges, and last week he took on an assault course, as you can see, not particularly convincing. And there he is, getting his leg over. Now he's going under Sir Ed Davey. Oh, he's a game fella. You've got to give him that. And Sir Ed couldn't resist a trip to a theme park after the Liberal Democrat manifesto was launched. As you can see, all aboard. And of course, he went on one of these stomach-churning rides there, spinning around in the air. It's one long adventure for Ed Davey. Stomach-churning stuff in every respect. And there he is, Sir Ed Davey, last weekend took part in a wheelbarrow race and he won it. I don't think his opponents trying very hard. They might have let him there, but you've got to admit the Liberal Democrats have come up with some pretty creative ideas over the last few weeks, and they've certainly got us talking. Yesterday, he got up to a rather more sedate pastime of building sandcastles, making politics look like child's play, or maybe he's just getting a bit tired. And of course, you can forget his summer makeover. You can't forget it. Live on television on ITV this morning, that made him look a little bit like Hannibal Lecter. Well, join me now to discuss the Lib Dems' chances of beating the Tories in the general election is the former Liberal Democrat Minister, Norman Baker. Norman, welcome to the show. So we're having a laugh about this, Norman, but the fact of the matter is we're talking about Ed Davey. We're talking about the Liberal Democrats. They're focusing on sewage. They're passionately manifesting on that, on the seats they know they can win. And Ed Davey is showing he's got a lighter side. They've surprised everybody. Now, Norman, this might not have been the kind of election campaign that you may have thought, but they've come from nowhere, and now it looks like they could be credible opposition. How did this happen?
Well, I wouldn't have been on that stomach-churning ride at Thorpe Park. I can tell you that for nothing, Martin. But and I'm also worried about Ed falling into Windermere, given the amount of sewage which the Tory party's allowed the water companies to dump. However, he's suggested he'd be able to capture the news. He's showed he's an individual. He's showed he's got a lighter side, as you said. And when you've got some dull politicians around like Keir Starmer, that's quite a nice contrast. Look, this election is very well poised for the Lib Dems. It's a perfect scenario for us. You've got the Tories deeply unpopular. That's one thing. You've got ourselves quite well organised and a good array of policies. And you've got the Labour Party, who are dull, uninspiring, but also regarded as relatively safe. I mean, people cannot be frightened by the Tories into voting for the Tories because of Jeremy Corbyn, because he's no longer there. Keir Starmer looks relatively harmless. And that's a nice combination of circumstances for the Lib Dems. And the Tories are in deep trouble, as we know. And there's a strong possibility that we will end up with Lib Dems a second party in Parliament. At least a 50-50 chance, I would say.
And Norman, what's been very noticeable, I believe, I've fought against Liberal Democrats in by-elections. They fight formidable by-elections. This seems to me to have been a very targeted campaign, going to areas where you know you're playing to an appreciative audience, you're going for areas where you know you can win, and you're fighting on the issues that they care about with a bit of fun on top. Rather than trying to fight everywhere and waste resource and lose, you're zoning in. Is that what's been emerging here, a zoned-in, targeted campaign where you know you're going to be well-liked with a bit of fun on top? Seems to be landing.
I think that's exactly right, Martin. It's been disciplined. We're not talking about a whole range of different issues. We're concentrating on the issues we think are most important to the public, the state of the economy, the public services which have gone down the pan, especially the NHS, and the destruction and damage to the environment from sewage and the water companies. I mean, they are issues I think everybody cares about, and we've been very clear on that. We've also had a good campaign in terms of recommending changes to carers, for example, to make sure that they're recognised properly in our society. And as you say, we put a bit of fun on top, which has garnered some media interest, but also just shows that we're all human and not just kind of two-dimensional, cut-out, cardboard politicians. So we've gone up in the opinion polls during the campaign. Ed's ratings personally have gone up in the campaign, and I think we're very well poised to do quite well. It's very clear that in the Blue Wall, in particular in the south, in places like Sussex, where I am, in Lewis, and in Surrey, in Jeremy Hunt's constituency, for example, we're now polling very strongly indeed. And given the nature of the Conservative vote, we're looking to pick up seats there. You know, plenty of Tory voters who would be frightened into voting Lib Dem or Labour because of Jeremy Corbyn last time round aren't frightened to voting Lib Dem this time round because we're seen as a sensible party, we're seen as some good ideas, and they're not particularly worried about Keir Starmer being in number 10.
And Norman, the big question is, we saw there trampolining, go-karting. How do you top it? What's next? Where will this end? Can we expect to see, I don't know, Ed Davey in a tutu on a trapeze? Can we expect to see him exiting as a human cannonball in a puff of glitter, blasting into the House of the Parliament? Will this continue, or are we going to see actually some more serious and robust policies, or is it all just one big lark?
Well, we've had a lot of robust policy, to be fair, and what Ed has done, I think, quite sensibly, is to draw attention to himself and then use the media coverage he's got to talk about serious issues like how we look after carers properly. So that's been part of the strategy. I hope he's now going to move on to more to-date activities. I saw he was building a sandcastle there. That's more my style, it has to be said. We'll perhaps see more of that in the next couple of weeks.
Well, Norman Baker, as you can see there, he's looking like the world's worst gladiator. I think he's about to go overboard again, is he? He does go overboard. I think I've seen this clip before. He does leap to some monkey bars, and he has to be said, a pretty feeble gladiator. I wonder what his gladiator name would be. But look, Norman Baker, we're talking about the campaign trail, and I think you're right. You know, it's a dour time. It's been a bit lacklustre. There's been a bit of fun injected from Lib Dems Ed Davey. Norman Baker, thanks for joining us. Always a pleasure to have your company. Now it's time now for our giveaway and your chance to win over £16,000 worth of prizes. That's 15 grand tax-free and a whole host of summer treats on top. Now, this could all be yours, but you've got to be in it to win it. Here's all the details.
Don't miss out on your chance to win our Summer Spectacular. And have we got a prize for you? First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your Summer Spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, a shock new survey claims that Britain's youngsters are more lazy than their counterparts in the European Union. Why are British kids so blooming lazy? We'll have that next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Recent polling suggests dentistry has become the hardest NHS service for patients to access, within NHS treatments still 15% lower than pre-pandemic levels. So a YouGov survey reveals that more than 70% of Brits describe seeing the dentist as difficult, compared with 64% for GPs and 42% for A&E services. One British man, get this, he even took to flying 10,000 miles for dental care, saying the extra time and money spent was far less hassle than trying to get an appointment on the NHS. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs. And a shocking 1/5 of UK adults have also admitted to trying DIY dentistry, including the old trick of tying string around a wobbly tooth and slamming it in the door so it comes out. So should people be more careful when taking their teeth into their own hands?
That is one of the problems. Obviously, population growth makes it much more difficult for people to access NHS services, but they need to then catch up on the other side with dental services and increase the amount of dentists and access to dentistry, and especially NHS dentistry, obviously.
What's the cut-off age for free dentistry on the NHS?
So it is 18 years old, but there are exemptions around maternity, pregnancy. There's some free care around pregnancy.
We saw some data a few weeks back about the number one cause for child admission into A&E is tooth decay. I mean, that was shocking when I read it.
It's really bad, and what happens is people, kids with multiple decayed teeth, they basically have to be put under general anaesthetic, and then all those rotted teeth have to be extracted under general anaesthetic. Like, if those baby teeth start going crooked, then the adult teeth start going crooked as well. So it is important to look after the baby teeth. It's really important. I think they should make it more central to their policies, definitely.
The People's Channel.
It's midday. Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates.
Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but actually, it's about you.
And we won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear
all sides
as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Don't miss a special edition of State of the Nation with Michael Portillo tonight and tomorrow night at 8 p.m. right here on GB News. Now, here's a question for you. Are young people in this country lazy? Well, I'm asking that after a study found that more than 12% of Brits aged under 25 are neither studying nor working nor in employment. In the European Union, however, the figure is just over 9%. So, are British kids simply getting lazier? And if so, why? To discuss this, I'm joined by the young entrepreneur Oliver Hodgson. Oliver, welcome to the show. So, a rather set of damning statistics from my friends at leave.eu. The figures speak for themselves. 12% of Britons aged under 25 are not in education, employment or training. It's only 9% in the European Union. What's going on? Why are Brits getting lazier?
Hi, Martin. I think this is absolute nonsense, to be perfectly honest. 12% is a very small percentage. I'm 20 years old, 21 in October, and for the last 4 years, I've been growing my own business without any backing from a parent or I'm from a very working class background. And I'm one of many young entrepreneurs, young Gen Zers who are ambitious, who want to work. And I know many of my peers who are employed, who love their job, want to progress their career. But yeah, okay, we can admit that, you know, technology as well has kind of made things quicker. So people are constantly on their phones. And you know, I also think this has been a thing for decades where generations blame younger generations and call them out for being lazy, disrespectful, etc. This isn't a new thing. Generations are always fighting and arguing. But Gen Z are one of the most ambitious generations. And the statistics show, you know, so many young people want to control their own destiny and own their own businesses. And, you know, the rise in social media, how many people are self-employed, etc. I think times have changed. But yeah, the 12%, I really don't think that's a lot of people. And you've got to think as well, COVID, right? I know people roll their eyes at me for mentioning this, but COVID kind of ruined 4 years of young people's lives. It's potentially distracted them, put them on a different course to what they maybe initially thought they were going on. They're taking more travel breaks, gap years. And yeah, okay, I guess, you know, previous generations are straight into work, etc. And potentially Gen Z are a bit more privileged in that the world's accessible to do these travel breaks. But I definitely think COVID has a lot to answer for in young people's attitude, both those who are like me and want to do good and want to, you know, upskill themselves, but also people who are a little bit, you know, short of that passion, I guess.
Oliver, I absolutely admire your glass half full, your on your bike mentality. I doff my cap to you. Good on you, son. But the facts are the facts. The amount of people who aren't in education, employment or training in the United Kingdom has increased to 900,000 in the first quarter of this year versus 812,000 in the same period last year. And that is a full 3% higher than in the European Union. They have the same things with COVID. They have the same things with lockdown. How can we get more British people, more young British people to think like you, to act like you? How do we motivate them into being more positive?
Well, I guess, you know, it starts with the media sharing stories like this, right? And I guess, you know, hats off to GB News, right? I think young people need to see the possibilities. You know, what, 99% of young people will have a phone and a Wi-Fi connection, and that's incredibly powerful. I agree, you know, okay, you know, 12%, the more I think about it, yeah, okay, it might be a lot of people. But I'm here to stick up for Generation Z because we get a lot of stick. We do. And, you know, there is the odd commentator who kind of brings our generation down, who, you know, who is young and just comes on telly to argue all the time about, you know, woke things, I guess. But, you know, I think we're a fantastic generation. Yes, we maybe need to show the possibilities a bit more, but we've got a Wi-Fi connection and a phone. And I guess if there is Gen Zers listening, that can really help you control your destiny.
Good. You know, you're a credit to yourself. You're a credit to your generation. Young entrepreneur Oliver Hodgson, thank you very much for keeping it so positive. Thanks for coming on GB News. Pleasure to have your company. Thank you. There's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock. I'll be joined live by a government minister to talk about whether or not Boris Johnson's intervention can help to turn the tide in this general election campaign. But first, it's your news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
The top stories this hour. The Prime Minister faced questions from farmers on a visit to Devon this afternoon. Rishi Sunak said it was a privilege to understand their contribution to society before he warned that 40,000 agricultural jobs could be lost as a result of Labour's plans.
Now, the contrast at this election is crystal clear. Because whilst we're going to do all those things for you, as David said, in the Labour manifesto, there were just 87 words about farming. No commitment to food production and food security. No commitment at all about the farming budget in the next Parliament. Forget about increasing it like we're going to do. They won't even say that they're going to protect it. Right? Like, that is the choice for you at this election, which is why it's so important that you come out and vote and you talk to your colleagues.
Rishi Sunak and more than 41,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel since Rishi Sunak promised to stop the boats. The Prime Minister says it's further evidence that the Rwanda policy is necessary, while Sir Keir Starmer pointed to Labour's plan to set up the new Border Security Command. And within the last hour, the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, says he'd abolish the licence fee which funds the BBC. The Reform UK leader was speaking during a town hall-style event this afternoon. It comes as the BBC said it would allow Reform to take part in an extra Question Time Leader special after Mr Farage's team complained about being left out. Those are the headlines. For the latest, sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound buying at $1.2696 and €1.1822. The price of gold is £1,000 and 18 pence, £833.77 an ounce. And the FTSE 100 has closed the day today at 8,191 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Polly. Now, hundreds of you have been getting in touch with your comments today, your says about the topic of Boris Johnson. Should he become the comeback kid? Well, got to say, most people are very against the idea in GB Newsland. Quickly here, John says this: Boris Johnson is not a Conservative. Mark, I love the notion that Boris can save anything these days. What a fantasy. Maureen, I don't think Boris Johnson will have much influence. He's past his sell-by date. Well, somebody who definitely hasn't passed their sell-by date is Michelle Dewberry, who joins me now. Jubes and Co, of course, 6 till 7. Jubes, what's on your menu?
Why, thank you, young man. I was wondering what you was going to say then when you was talking about sell-by dates, and then you chucked over to me. Well, of course, it is almost the deadline, Martin, to register to vote. So I want to have a debate tonight about how we encourage more people in these final hours then to participate. I also, as well, want to talk about this whole notion of vetting. What's going on? Is it fair and just to be going back decades into people's social media histories and judging them on that as to whether or not they are fine candidates for the election now or not? I also want to ask about the drink driving limit in this country. Should it be reduced to a small drink or perhaps even nothing at all if you're going to get behind the wheel? And I also want to ask about Joe Biden. You know, is he losing his marbles, Martin, or are we victim of kind of edited fakes? Because that is a suggestion.
I think those marbles may have been lost long ago. Michelle Dewberry, 6 till 7, a superb menu as ever. Jubes and Co right after my show. Superb, thank you. Now, if you want to get in touch with us, there's a new way, and here's Bev Turner with all of the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems continue in North Yorkshire for the A172. The Marton Road stays closed through Middlesbrough at the scene of what is being described as a serious accident at the Marton Crossroads. In Tyne Wear, the A1, the Western Bypass, stays closed southbound from junction 73 to 72, so just west of Gateshead for emergency repair works. Meanwhile, in Lancashire, the A56 is shut from Haslington up to the Rising Bridge roundabout north of Ramsbottom following an accident. The M25 in Buckinghamshire really slow anti-clockwise after an earlier collision just north of the M40. The Surrey stretch is blocked clockwise just before 6 at Godstone. There was an accident in the roadworks. And on the Kent stretch, the left lane shut anti-clockwise. A car's broken down just before the Darren interchange. Finally, on London Underground, Northern Line trains can't run High Barnet to Camden Town. There was a fire alert at High Barnet. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Theatres and drama schools are being offered plus-size inclusivity training. Come on, seriously, is this really a thing? In order to tackle fat phobia, to apparently make the theatre more inclusive for bigger bodies, a lady called Ruth Ann Phillips, who is a plus-size theatre director, she's behind the drive. Now, apparently, her own research, so it's not exactly independent, showed that 9 out of 10 respondents should have training on size inclusion. Ruth is also the co-founder of Inclusion Collective, which is an organisation that provides training in creative well-being, body positivity and inclusive movement. Her website contains resources on fat activism, advocacy for the rights and dignity of fat people, combating discrimination and the body-conscious scale. This is actually about health. Ruth is conflating the two. Professor Carol Sikora, a consultant oncologist, said normalising obesity has become fashionable in advertising and the media, simply to sell stuff. But it's got nothing to do with celebrating diversity. Nobody needs to be fat. It's like encouraging risky behaviours such as smoking, driving after a booze up, or lying like a lobster on the beach in the sun. A balanced diet and lots of exercise are the cornerstones of a healthy lifestyle. He went on to say, how can anybody possibly justify these projects? Plus size, inclusivity, training. Please bring back common sense. Well, exactly. I'm for equal opportunity and for giving people credit based on merit and what they bring to the table, even if it is food. Only joking. That's where the way to my heart is through my gut. I'm looking for a man that can cook. But in truth, being obese can be dangerous. And whilst I absolutely agree you should love what God gave you, obesity is the biggest killer and costs the health service a fortune. People come in all shapes and sizes, and it's a wonderful thing. But to conflate body positivity with obesity is very dangerous.
The People's Channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:39. We're on the final furlong. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, doctors will be pushing the next government for tougher rules on drink driving. The British Medical Foundation say they want to see it reduce the limit to a small glass of wine or beer. And to discuss this, we're now joined by a trustee of the Campaign Against Drink Driving, John Scrooby. John, welcome to the show. So the trend has been stubbornly high. In fact, John, we've actually seen an increase in drink driving fatalities. Do you think the answer is just better education, or, like the BMF, do you think it's time to clamp down on drink driving, perhaps, and ban it altogether?
It's certainly time to clamp down. Successive governments have failed to grasp the nettle. We've been campaigning for many, many years to get the drink drive limit reduced. We will never achieve a zero result for medical reasons, but to get it down to as low as possible. We currently have the highest tolerance level to alcohol and driving in the developed world. Malta have just reduced theirs. England and Wales is now the highest in Europe.
And yet we've seen in Scotland, they have basically half the limit we have in the rest of the UK. And the evidence shows that Scotland is perhaps leading the way. Only 4.1% of casualties occurring in drink driving collisions in Scotland, 5.2% in England. But of course, the counter argument, John Scrooby, is that this could decimate the already beleaguered rural pub industry. Is there not evidence to say that with better education and with more awareness, we can still keep the limit as it currently stands?
I think education goes along with legislation. The limit has got to be the same across the country. There's no doubt about that. As regards country pubs, I live in a small village myself with just one pub. I appreciate that people might have difficulty getting transport to the pubs. There are such things as taxis, as public transport. There's a designated driver scheme. If you want to go out in a group of people, then nominate a designated driver who will not drink. There are solutions there.
But the more rural areas of the United Kingdom are the ones that tend to be harder hit. For example, in Wales, 7.3%. It's 50% higher than in England and almost double what happens in Scotland. Interestingly, the lowest is in London, probably because cars can't ever get above walking pace. But on a serious point, should we really be heading towards a situation of prohibition like we see in other countries, or should we rely on people to be trusted, to be moderate, to be sensible?
We can rely on people to do it if people are educated enough to do it. Everybody knows that drinking and driving do not mix. 3,500 people in the UK killed every year in road collisions. That's a 9/11 every single year in England and Wales alone. It's not acceptable. These people are not collateral damage.
And it's also worth pointing out, John Scrooby, that the most likely demographic are young men, and particularly those who've recently passed their tests. Now, it suggests here there should be specific limits for those who've recently passed their tests. Would you back that? So it's a half pint, only a half pint of beer or equivalent if you've recently passed your test. Is that fair, or is that a draconian clampdown?
I think it's fair. I mean, I've worked very closely with young drivers, novice drivers previously, and their concept of drinking and driving is very much as it was back in the 60s and 70s. There are still sort of myths and legends that need to be disposed of about drinking and driving. These limits were set back in the 60s, when the strongest drink you could probably get was perhaps a Double Diamond or a Mackinson, very weak beer. These days, you can walk around the corner to the local shop and pick up a can of beer that's 9%. Now, it's all right saying, I've only had one drink. You've got to think, what have I been drinking? Because a 9% lager is 3 times as strong as what you'll get in the pub. It's no point saying, I've only had one drink, I can drive. Yeah. It really is not rocket science. If you're going to drive, then do not drink.
OK, superb. Thank you for your wisdom and sharing that with us. And that's John Scrooby, who's a trustee of the Campaign Against Drink Driving. Thank you for joining us on the show. Now, I'm about to be joined by a government minister. I'll ask him if he's glad that Boris Johnson is throwing his weight behind the Tories' election win campaign, or could Boris be a liability? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Thunderstorms may start to break out over the next few hours with a warning in force for some of us, but for most areas it will stay dry through this evening and into tomorrow as well. That's because high pressure is not too far away. It's building in from the south and west for the next few days, bringing many of us plenty of fine weather. But there is a risk of thunderstorms through this evening for parts of northern England. So do take care if you're in those areas and take a closer look at the details of the warning. But for most of us, it should stay fairly dry this evening and overnight. There will be some cloud around, particularly across central areas of England and up towards Scotland as well. And it will turn quite cold under the clear skies, particularly across Northern Ireland and Scotland. We could see temperatures down to the low single figures overnight tonight, but there will be plenty of sunshine to start the day across northern Scotland, where it's been fairly cloudy and quite cold through the past few days with that northerly wind. It's going to be a much brighter start on Wednesday, and in Northern Ireland as well, wall-to-wall sunshine to start the day. Temperatures around 11 or 10 degrees first thing, but they will rise through the afternoon. In the south as well, plenty of sunshine to start the day. So for many of us, a very fine start to the day indeed, and there'll be plenty more fine weather to come through tomorrow. It will remain largely dry for the bulk of the UK. There's a risk of the odd shower developing here and there, but I think you'll be very unlucky to be caught in any of those showers. However, notice we do have cloud thickening from the northwest. This is the weather front approaching into parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. It will bring cloudier skies and slightly cooler weather here to end the day, but inland areas of England and Wales could see temperatures climbing towards the mid-20s. Now, through the rest of Wednesday evening, plenty of fine weather to end the day. That weather front won't make too much progress inland, although skies will remain cloudy across the far northwest of Scotland. And that pattern continues as we head to Friday and the weekend, with plenty of dry and warm weather across the south.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frothy in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
Yeah, for dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:48. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now let's get more on the election campaign now. And I'm joined by the Deputy Foreign Secretary, Andrew Mitchell. Andrew, welcome to the show. Can I talk to you about the hot topic of, is it time to bring back Boris? I'd like to read out a couple of emails we've had from our viewers. It may surprise you to learn they're broadly against this idea. Mark says this: bringing back Bojo would literally be like Keir Starmer bringing back Corbyn for the next 2 weeks. John says Boris is not a Conservative. And Mark adds, I love this notion that Boris can save anything he touches. It's a fantasy. His time is up. What do you say to that?
What I say to that, and good afternoon to you and to your viewers, is that all good Conservatives now should rally to the flag and should be fighting to increase the millions of votes that the Conservative Party is going to get on July the 4th, so that we keep a socialist out of number 10. And that includes everyone from the top to the bottom of the party, and I'm delighted that Boris and David Cameron are both putting their shoulder to the wheel to help the Prime Minister win this election.
But a lot of people in our inbox today, Andrew, they're saying that they agree with you. They want the Conservative Party to be Conservative, but they are saying that Boris Johnson's legacy, if you like, has been exposed as him not being a Conservative. They're saying here, Robert says, Boris couldn't care less about the damage to our country and society that illegal immigrants crossing the Channel have caused, and others pointing out he threw his full weight behind the Net Zero project. So people seem to be saying, yes, let's have more conservatism. They're just putting a question mark over whether Boris Johnson is the right man to do that.
Well, he is a Conservative and he is fighting for the victory of Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, in this election. And you're asking me whether I welcome all Conservatives hitting the election trail, working flat out between now and 10 p.m. on July the 4th to secure every single possible Conservative vote. And of course, I welcome every Conservative doing that. So that's what all good Conservatives should be doing.
Can I ask you about another announcement that's been made this afternoon, and that's from the Reform Party leader, Nigel Farage, who said that he would abolish the BBC licence fee. It's fair to say that that proposition has garnered a huge amount of support from our viewers and listeners who feel that the BBC licence fee is expensive and outmoded. Many feel that the corporation is now biased against conservatism. Is that a policy? Nadine Dorris seemed to back it back in her day. Is that something you think that the Conservative Party should perhaps be looking at?
Well, it's perfectly proper for any government and any party to look at whether there are better ways of financing the BBC. I think we should accept that the BBC is one of the great organisations with enormous soft power impact around the world, and it's also much respected in the United Kingdom as well. But it's perfectly proper for people to look at a different way of financing. But before you announce its abolition, I think you have to come up with that alternative. And it's an interesting idea which really underlines that the manifesto, or contract, I think Nigel calls it, with the British people, it isn't really, you know, a programme for government. It's a sort of wish list, which would be incredibly difficult to implement. And I think it's only right to say that people should not vote for a programme that is not properly costed, and which all the experts who've looked at it said it simply isn't possible for this to be delivered.
Well, the details specifically on the BBC licence fee is to put it to the market, to make it a subscription model, as we may pay for other services in an era of on-demand television. So there is a clear plan here. Stop charging people, stop sending them to prison if they don't pay, and give them the option of paying in a free market. You're a Conservative, you must back free markets, surely.
Yes, I do, of course. But the point I'm making is that if you're going to abolish the licence fee, you have to have an alternative. We've looked at this. Indeed, Nadine Dorris looked at this during her time at the Ministry of Culture, Media and Sport. It's been looked at during my time in the House of Commons, which stretches back nearly 40 years now. It's been looked at on numerous occasions, but no one in the end has come up with a better system. We've constrained it. George Osborne did not allow the BBC to increase the amount of the licence fee by anything like as much as they wanted. So we have looked at this, but before you move to abolition of the licence fee, you have got to come up with a credible alternative that works. And at the moment, no one has been able to do that. So, you know, it may happen in the future. It may be something that governments want to look at, but I think just announcing you're going to abolish it without having something else is like setting off on a journey without knowing where you're going.
Andrew Mitchell, could I quickly get you to comment on another thing that George Osborne said today? He's saying Rishi Sunak being pulled into fighting the wrong campaign by trying to stop reform. You're talking about reform too much. Should you not be focused on winning votes rather than trying to stop the Reform Party getting votes?
Well, we are intent on trying to stop Labour getting into government without saying properly what they would do, with every danger, if the polls are right, of there being a very substantial socialist majority in the House of Commons. We're trying to make sure that all their policies are probed, and we are warning that a vote for reform, if you're on the centre-right, is a very self-indulgent act, because all it will do is put Keir Starmer into number 10. A vote for reform that would otherwise go to the Conservative Party is a vote to put Labour into government, and we're right to warn about that, but we're also right to probe their policies in every way we can.
We have to leave it there. Andrew Mitchell will simply run out of time. Thanks for joining us on the show. Now, there's a new way to get in touch. No, we're going to move on to tomorrow. It's all from me for now. Jubes & Co. is up next. I'll be back tomorrow at 3. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. But before this, it's your weather with Annie Shuttleworth. See you tomorrow.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Thunderstorms may start to break out over the next few hours with a warning in force for some of us, but for most areas it will stay dry through this evening and into tomorrow as well. That's because high pressure is not too far away. It's building in from the south and west for the next few days, bringing many of us plenty of fine weather. But there is a risk of thunderstorms through this evening for parts of northern England. So do take care if you're in those areas and take a closer look at the details of the warning. But for most of us, it should stay fairly dry this evening and overnight. There will be some cloud around, particularly across central areas of England and up towards Scotland as well. And it will turn quite cold under the clear skies, particularly across Northern Ireland and Scotland. We could see temperatures down to the low single figures overnight tonight, but there will be plenty of sunshine to start the day across northern Scotland, where it's been fairly cloudy and quite cold through the past few days with that northerly wind. It's going to be a much brighter start on Wednesday, and in Northern Ireland as well, wall-to-wall sunshine to start the day. Temperatures around 11 or 10 degrees first thing, but they will rise through the afternoon. In the south as well, plenty of sunshine to start the day. So for many of us, a very fine start to the day indeed, and there'll be plenty more fine weather to come through tomorrow. It will remain largely dry for the bulk of the UK. There's a risk of the odd shower developing here and there, but I think you'll be very unlucky to be caught in any of those showers. However, notice we do have cloud thickening from the northwest. This is the weather front approaching into parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. It will bring cloudier skies and slightly cooler weather here to end the day, but inland areas of England and Wales could see temperatures climbing towards the mid-20s. Now, through the rest of Wednesday evening, plenty of fine weather to end the day. That weather front won't make too much progress inland, although skies will remain cloudy across the far northwest of Scotland. And that pattern continues as we head to Friday and the weekend, with plenty of dry and warm weather across the south.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Problems up in Tyne and Wear do continue for the A1. The Western Bypass remains closed southbound between the Bladen turnoff and the Swalwell junctions just west of Gateshead, of course, where emergency repair works are still taking place. In West Yorkshire, the A656 at Micklefield remains shut at the scene of a multi-vehicle collision, and in Lancashire, the A56 remains shut northbound from Haslington up to Rossendale following an accident, and in Greater Manchester on the M62 westbound, a lane's closed at 19 at Hayward following a breakdown. The Surrey stretch of the M25 still really slow clockwise after an earlier collision just before Godstone in the roadworks. It's queuing back into Kent onto the M26, and on the Kent stretch, it's anti-clockwise. It's really slow after a car broke down just before the Darren interchange. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Don't miss out on your chance to win our Summer Spectacular. And have we got a prize for you? First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.